Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Samantha Josephson. Samantha Josephson was born to Seymour and Marcy Josephson in Princeton, New Jersey, and grew up in Robinsville, New Jersey. She majored in political science at the University of South Carolina. She plans to attend Drexel University School of Law with the goal of specializing in international law. Samantha received a full scholarship to Drexel University and a partial scholarship to Rutgers University and hopes to pursue a career in international law. Samantha was a member of the Alpha Gamma Delta sorority and had the opportunity to study abroad in Barcelona. While in South Carolina, she also visited Madrid and Paris. Samantha had a boyfriend named Greg. Samantha and Greg communicated regularly through text messages and phone calls every day whenever possible. Even though Samantha was about to enter law school, they still planned to build a future together. Greg planned to move in with her and support her. However, everything changed on Friday, March 29, 2019, when Samantha did not return to her apartment. On March 28, 2019, Samantha decided to hang out with her roommate and friends in Columbia, South Carolina. Although her boyfriend, Greg, was unable to come along, the group visited several bars before ending up at the Bird Dog Bar in 5 Points, a popular place for students to socialize. Samantha was hanging out with friends, but she kept texting her boyfriend, Greg. She wanted him to drive to Columbia to be with her. However, they had plans to meet up the following weekend, so Greg decided not to go to Columbia with her. He kept in regular contact with Samantha. Around 2 a.m., Samantha left and returned to her apartment alone. She called an Uber to get home. Samantha was waiting for an Uber. While waiting, she talked to Greg on the phone at around 2:04 a.m. and told him she was on her way home. She had used Uber many times before to get to and from bars. Shortly after requesting a ride, a car pulled up at the curb where Samantha walked up to the car, realized it wasn't hers, and then turned around to return to her spot on the sidewalk. She was wearing an orange shirt and black pants. After some time, a black Chevrolet Impala pulled up in front of Samantha. She said goodbye to Greg, assuming the Impala was her ride. She opened the door, exchanged a quick word with the driver, and got into the back seat. The car sped off immediately. Meanwhile, the actual Uber she had ordered arrived at the pickup location, but the driver couldn't find Samantha and eventually canceled the request and left. The black Chevrolet Impala circled the area several times before targeting Samantha. This behavior suggests that the driver was aware of the college students who congregated on 5 Point streets after the bars closed, waiting for the car to leave. Meanwhile, Samantha's boyfriend, Greg, had been tracking her movements using the Find My Friends app to make sure she got home safely. He noticed that she was moving in the opposite direction of her apartment, which initially did not raise any concerns because he thought she might be visiting a friend. However, when he texted her to check in, he received no response. Greg tried calling Samantha, but she didn't answer. He sent her multiple texts, but they showed up as delivered, not read. This meant Samantha wasn't reading his messages. Her phone's location stopped sharing, which surprised Greg because it had never happened before. He thought maybe she had left her phone in the Uber. Concerned, Greg contacted her friends and roommate to see if they had heard from her or if she had made it home safely. However, no one had any news about her whereabouts. Greg decided to rest, hoping Samantha would show up tomorrow morning. The next morning, Samantha was missing. Her roommates filed a missing person report. Her boyfriend, Greg, drove 2 hours to Columbia to help search for her. Shortly after the report was filed, a group of turkey hunters found the body of a young woman in a wooded area in New Zion, about 65 miles from 5 Points. The hunters immediately called 911 after the discovery, and the local sheriff's office quickly dispatched deputies to the scene. The body was later confirmed to be Samantha Josephson. An autopsy revealed that Samantha's body had more than 120 separate stab wounds affecting multiple areas, including her face, head, neck, arms, torso, legs, and feet. In an attempt to defend herself, her fingernails were severely damaged as she tried to evade a sharp object. Evidence suggested a double-edged knife had been used, and she had then been dragged into the woods. An autopsy revealed that her body contained only 20 milliliters of blood. Samantha had suffered severe blood loss. Police quickly obtained surveillance footage from the bar the night of the incident, which showed Samantha getting into a black Chevrolet Impala. The footage showed the car circling the block several times. Police discovered that Samantha had accidentally gotten into the killer's car, thinking it was her Uber. The Uber that Samantha had called arrived a short time later. However, when the driver realized that Samantha was not there, he canceled the ride and left. Police believe that the suspect may have used a childproof lock to lock her inside, as when the childproof lock is on, the doors can only be opened from the outside of the car, so Samantha would not have been able to get out at that point. A description of the vehicle was released to the public in hopes of identifying the perpetrator, and shortly after, police spotted a black Chevrolet Impala during a 3 a.m. patrol on March 30th, while patrolling the area where Samantha was abducted. When the police stopped the car, the driver immediately jumped out and started running. After a short chase, he was arrested. When police checked his ID, they discovered that the man arrested was Nathaniel Rowland, 24, of New Zion. During a search of the vehicle, patrol officers discovered a child car seat in the back, surrounded by blood stains. This discovery prompted them to call for backup. As police suspected it was a crime scene, homicide detectives were called to investigate and conducted a thorough search of the vehicle. They discovered multiple blood stains on the passenger seat and in the trunk, as well as a bloody footprint on one of the rear windows. Samantha's cell phone was found on the floor of the car. Police later discovered that Nathaniel had tried to sell it to a pawn shop earlier that day, but he had refused their offer of $125 and left the phone in the car. Police also found that the child locks were activated, which Nathaniel had used to lock Samantha inside. Several cleaning products, including bleach, window cleaner, and antibacterial wipes, were found in the car. Nathaniel had cleaned his car, but there was still a trace of blood in the car. During questioning, Nathaniel repeatedly denied any involvement in the kidnapping and murder of Samantha Josephson, despite the overwhelming evidence against him. He maintained his innocence. Police searching Nathaniel's body discovered traces of Samantha's DNA under his fingernails. However, no DNA from Nathaniel was found on Samantha's body. Police pieced together the evidence and speculated that Samantha was the victim of a sudden and violent attack. The fact that the child-proof locks in the car were still active at the time of Nathaniel's arrest led them to conclude that he must have activated the feature as soon as Samantha got into the car. Nathaniel suddenly stabbed her multiple times with a double-edged knife. Taken by surprise by the brutality of the attack, she struggled to fend off the blows, which explains the multiple stab wounds to her hands and the severe damage to her fingernails. Samantha was attacked by Nathaniel, who scratched Nathaniel's hand, leaving skin cells under her fingernails as evidence. After the attack, Nathaniel drove to a remote road in New Zion and dumped Samantha's body in the nearby woods. Upon returning home, Nathaniel posted on social media, acting as if nothing unusual had happened. Nathaniel's neighborhood is minutes away from where Samantha's body was found. A background check on Nathaniel showed that he attended South Carolina State University in 2017. However, there is no record of him graduating and it is unclear what job he was doing at the time of the incident. Nathaniel was previously arrested for assaulting and robbing a woman in October 2018. Police searched Nathaniel's girlfriend, Maria Howard's apartment in New Zion, where he was living. They found evidence in a trash can behind the apartment, including a sock and towel with blood stains on it, which belonged to Nathaniel. The blood was later determined to be Samantha's. Police also discovered a blood-stained white cloth, duct tape, bleach wipes with blood on them, and a double-edged knife with obvious blood stains. Tests later confirmed that blood found on the double-edged knife, bed sheets, car, and bleach wipes matched Samantha Josephson. Nathaniel was charged with kidnapping and murder. The trial took place. Nathaniel maintained his innocence despite overwhelming evidence against him. In the summer of 2021, Nathaniel's defense team argued that he was innocent, as there was no DNA of his on Samantha. Prosecutors countered Nathaniel's claim of innocence with a large amount of evidence gathered in the case. Key evidence included CCTV footage showing Nathaniel's car picking up Samantha in 5 points and driving away, as well as several incriminating physical pieces of evidence found in his car. Additionally, cell phone tracking showed that Nathaniel and Samantha's phones were in the same location at the time of the murder. Furthermore, Nathaniel lived near where Samantha's body was discovered. The prosecution presented 31 witnesses, including a person who saw Nathaniel cleaning the murder weapon, the pawn shop owner to whom he tried to sell Samantha's cell phone, and Nathaniel's ex-girlfriend, who claimed that her daughter had blood on her shoes after being in Nathaniel's car. After the murder, Nathaniel did not contact any witnesses to testify in his favor, and no members of Nathaniel's family came forward to defend him. Despite this, Nathaniel maintained his innocence and appealed to the judge. The jury deliberated for only an hour before returning a guilty verdict, and Nathaniel was subsequently sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Kendra Hatcher. Kendra Hatcher was born on February 3, 1980, in Springfield, Sangamon County, Illinois, to Reagan Hatcher and Bonnie Gibson Jameson Colley. Her parents divorced, and her mother later married Bruce Jimon. She had 3 sisters, Jamie Coleman Ashel Lepum, Melissa Jameson, and a brother, Neil Hatcher. Kendra grew up in Pleasant Plains, where she studied dentistry. After getting divorced in 2010, she moved to Dallas and started working at Smile Zone, a dental studio. As a devout Christian, Kendra wanted to use her dental skills to help others, providing free services to disadvantaged children at the clinic. In her spare time, Kendra was involved in various activities, including teaching Bible studies and participating in volunteer programs. These programs involved building churches abroad and providing free dental services to children in Ecuador. After moving to Dallas, Kendra's professional career took off rapidly. Her personal life also began to blossom when she met Dr. Ricardo Palacios through a dating app on May 24, 2015. Kendra and Ricardo shared similar values, interests, and life goals. Ricardo was completing his dermatology residency at the University of Texas Southwestern Medical Center. Despite having only been together for a few months, they were already discussing their upcoming marriage. A tragic incident in a parking lot took the life of Kendra, cutting short all their future plans. Upon arriving at the crime scene, investigators examined the evidence and initially suspected robbery as the motive, given that Kendra's purse and some valuables were missing. They found bullet fragments and a gun magazine near her body. However, the circumstances of the shooting and the bullet wounds suggested that robbery was not the primary motive. One bullet struck Kendra in the back, while the other hit her in the head. The entry wound was at the top of her head, and the bullet exited through her chin, indicating that she had her hands up and behind her head when she was shot. The murder theory was later confirmed when investigators obtained CCTV footage and reconstructed the events. The footage showed a black Jeep Grand Cherokee entering the parking lot at 7:15 p.m. 30 minutes later, Kendra returned home and parked in the same garage. Shortly after, a man approached her, shot her, and then ran to the side before jumping into the Jeep and driving off. Although the video quality was poor and the crime scene was not clearly visible, The authorities were unable to identify the assailant. However, they put the vehicle on a wanted list and appealed to the public for assistance. A man named Ortiz contacted the police after recognizing his car and footage related to the shooting. Ortiz claimed that, although the car belonged to him, he was not involved in the shooting and was not driving it at the time. He explained that, on the morning of September 2nd, he had lent his Jeep to two of his girlfriends, Brenda Delgado and Crystal Cortez, who asked to borrow it until the evening. Later that evening, Brenda called Ortiz to meet her at a restaurant where they were at the time of the crime. Meanwhile, Crystal Cortez drove the Jeep back to Ortiz's house. When Ortiz saw his Jeep on the TV news, he confronted Brenda, who initially denied that it was his Jeep, then admitted that Crystal had used it without his knowledge. Brenda tried to persuade Ortiz not to report the incident, offering to pay to have the Jeep repainted. At first, Ortiz was hesitant to get involved with the police, fearing it might jeopardize his pending U.S. citizenship. However, he eventually decided to cooperate and provided the police with the names of Brenda and Crystal. The police then tracked the movements of the Jeep on the day of the crime and located the two women. Brenda Delgado was the first to be questioned, but she claimed to have no knowledge of Kendra Hatcher and provided an alibi, stating she was at a restaurant with Ortiz at the time of the crime and produced receipts as proof. However, as the investigation continued, the truth slowly emerged, revealing the attempts by the perpetrators to conceal their involvement. Brenda Delgado came from a modest family. Her parents, Luis and Maria, immigrated to Dallas from Mexico, where her father worked in a factory. Brenda excelled academically and dreamed of attending medical school, but her parents couldn't afford the tuition. After high school, she continued to live with her parents, working as a dental assistant and at a spa, while still aspiring to a more affluent and beautiful life. Brenda balanced her dental assistant job with spa work, where she whitened her teeth. In 2012, she fell for Ricardo at a Jennifer Lopez concert. 3 months later, she moved in with him. Ricardo was smitten, meeting her parents, and Brenda gushed about her love in a Facebook birthday post. Brenda discovered she was pregnant, but Ricardo convinced her to have an abortion, leaving her devastated. After recovering from the ordeal, Brenda focused on her career and her beloved Ricky. She enrolled in Stanford that fall. Although it seemed like Brenda had moved on from the breakup, she was still hurting. Her obsession with Ricardo intensified, and when Ricky posted a photo with his new girlfriend, Kendra, a model-like beauty, Brenda was consumed by dark thoughts. Those close to her claimed she fantasized about harming Kendra. Investigators suspected Brenda had a strong motive to harm her rival. Ricardo confirmed that Brenda Delgado was his ex-girlfriend, and they had an on-again, off-again relationship from 2012 to 2015. They broke up a few months before Ricky met Kendra. Despite this, Ricardo believed he and Brenda remained friends and didn't think there was any bad blood between Brenda and Kendra. The reconstructed events revealed a disturbing picture of how manipulative and ruthless an abused woman can be. Brenda Delgado concocted a sinister plan to win back her former lover, Ricardo, and eliminate Kendra Hatcher, the woman he had moved on to. Initially, Brenda posed as Ricardo's supportive friend, pretending to take an interest in his relationship with Kendra. Unbeknownst to Ricardo, she gathered information about their future plans, which he naively believed was genuine concern. After Kendra's death, Ricardo confided in Brenda via text message, pouring out his grief. Brenda feigned sympathy, offering to help him in any way possible. Unaware of her true intentions, Ricardo trusted her completely. What he didn't know was that Brenda had been secretly manipulating him for months. She had been snooping on his mail, learning about his plans with Kendra, including their travel arrangements. This discovery fueled her anger, and she became fixated on eliminating Kendra, whom she believed had usurped her place in Ricardo's life. Brenda took control of Ricardo's phone account and used it to stalk him, keeping close tabs on his activities and those of his girlfriend Kendra. This obsession soon became her sole purpose in life. Brenda's fixation on stalking eventually led her to quit her job and dedicate all her time to achieving her twisted goals. Over time, she devised a cruel and terrifying plan to murder Kendra and take her place beside Ricardo. To put her plan into action, Brenda approached several acquaintances with an offer to harm Kendra in exchange for money. She eventually found a 21-year-old single mother, Crystal Cortez, who was struggling financially and willing to assist her. Crystal recruited a perpetrator, Christopher Love, who agreed to commit the crime. Brenda paid Crystal $500 and provided her with illegal substances, which Crystal then passed on to Christopher. Several women were tasked with following Kendra to learn her daily routines and identify the best location and time to carry out the crime. On September 2, 2015, they borrowed Jose's car. Crystal and Christopher lay in wait for Kendra in the parking lot, but lost their nerve and didn't follow her home from work due to fear of getting stuck in traffic. Later that evening, they finally carried out their sinister plan and were rewarded for their efforts. A few days after the crime, Crystal Cortez and Christopher Love were arrested. They both denied any involvement in the crime and claimed they were not at the scene. However, when the police found the murder weapon in the car, Love's story fell apart. Meanwhile, Crystal's alibi was inconsistent and confusing. At first, she claimed she was driving in the parking lot because an armed carjacker had taken over her SUV and forced her there. She even falsely stated that her young son was with her, but surveillance cameras showed no evidence of a child. As the investigation continued and more evidence emerged, Crystal changed her story again, this time offering to cooperate with the police in exchange for a reduced sentence. She implicated Brenda, claiming that she was the mastermind behind the crime and that they had been planning it for 2 weeks. According to Crystal, Brenda's obsession with winning back her ex-boyfriend, Ricardo, drove her to despise Kendra, whom she believed had taken her place. Brenda had pretended to be happy for Ricardo, but her life was actually unraveling. According to Crystal, Brenda decided to get rid of Kendra Hatcher at this point. In Crystal's testimony, she detailed how Brenda devised a plan to kill Kendra, enlisting her support. Brenda and Crystal started formulating a plan to kill Kendra, meeting several times and developing multiple plans. Initially, they planned to inject Kendra with illegal substances or sedatives and then dispose of her body. However, to avoid suspicion, Brenda needed a reliable enforcer and began looking for one. They drove around rough neighborhoods, asking people if they could help, which led them to Christopher Love, who agreed to help and participated in deciding the method of the crime. The three of them decided that shooting Kendra would be the quickest way to kill her. Crystal cooperated with authorities, revealing September 2nd wasn't a random choice. Brenda knew Kendra and Ricardo were going to Mexico, so they decided to kill Kendra before their trip. They wanted it to look like a botched robbery. Brenda and Crystal tracked Kendra's movements for days, noting her activities minute by minute. They traced her route home and entered the apartment complex's parking garage on September 1st, 2015, to set up the crime. Brenda and Crystal made a final check on the day of the crime. They picked up the Jeep and Christopher, dropping Brenda at the library to establish an alibi. Crystal and Christopher waited near Kendra's apartment, then followed her, losing her in traffic. They waited at her house, and when she arrived, Christopher shot her. Crystal claimed she didn't see it but heard the shot. She drove Christopher home, picked up her son, and returned the Jeep to Jose. Brenda's plan had finally come to fruition. She had eliminated her rival, and all she had to do was wait for a message from her beloved Ricardo. Brenda was thrilled to have committed the perfect crime. However, Crystal's subsequent confession and testimony against Brenda left no doubt about her guilt, and a warrant for her arrest was promptly issued. When the police arrived with the warrant, Brenda was no longer at home, having fled to Mexico using her dual citizenship. Brenda's involvement in a contract killing came to light after she fled, and on April 6, 2016, she was placed on the FBI's wanted list. With a $100,000 reward offered for information about her, she became the 9th woman to ever be listed among the most wanted fugitives, and the only woman on the list at the time. However, her freedom was short-lived, as she was apprehended just 2 days later in Torreon, Coahuila, by Mexican authorities, who extradited her to the United States on October 6, but only on the condition that she would not face the death penalty. Brenda was charged with capital murder in the U.S. At her 2017 Texas trial, relatives of Kendra and Ricardo spoke out. Witnesses testified, confirming Brenda's intentions and obsession with her ex. Her cousin Moses revealed Brenda's depression and her attempt to hire him to hurt Kendra. Brenda was obsessed with Ricardo, said friend Jennifer Escobar. Brenda read Ricardo's emails, tracked his movements, and had his house key and bank access. She asked Jennifer to kill or disable Kendra Hatcher, offering $2,000, a car, and drugs. Jennifer refused after consulting her parents. In court, multiple people who knew Brenda testified about her obsession, and it was established that Brenda had a motive to want Kendra dead. She viewed Kendra as an obstacle to getting what she wanted, specifically reuniting with Ricky. In the months leading up to Kendra's death, Brenda's obsession grew increasingly intense, as corroborated by evidence presented in court. This evidence included an ATM withdrawal receipt for $500, which Brenda later gave to Crystal as payment for her role, as well as a $600 cash payment received by Christopher Love. Furthermore, cell phone records revealed that Brenda, Crystal, and Christopher were together before the crime, with over 99 calls exchanged between Brenda and Crystal between August 22nd and September 4th, demonstrating their frequent communication to discuss the plan to kill Kendra Hatcher. Despite an alibi and receipts showing she was at a restaurant, the jury quickly found her guilty of Kendra Hatcher's murder. Delgado was sentenced to life without parole. Crystal Cortez, who cooperated with the investigation and pleaded guilty, received a 35-year prison sentence with parole eligibility. The Hatcher family expressed satisfaction with the court's decision and quietly left the courtroom following the verdict. On the other hand, the Delgado family, who knew Brenda as a loving daughter and woman with strong Christian values, refused to believe she was involved until the end. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Anna Walsh. Anna Luic, later known as Anna O'Neill, was born on April 18, 1983 in Belgrade, Serbia. She grew up in a cultured family with her younger sister. At the 5th Belgrade Gymnasium, Anna excelled as a standout student. She then attended Belgrade Research University, the most historic and expansive university in Serbia. Anna pursued foreign languages, earning a master's degree in French language and literature at 22. With her diploma, Anna sought a new chapter in the United States, fully supported by her family. In 2005, she settled in the U.S., aiming to further her education in hospitality management. She took administrative roles at prestigious hotels, including the Inn at Little Washington in Virginia. Anna's warm approach, sense of duty, and conflict resolution skills quickly earned her respect from peers and supervisors. Multilingual and charming, she formed connections easily. Beloved by colleagues and friends, Anna seized every chance to shine. She became a U.S. citizen, retaining her Serbian nationality, and enjoyed a high income, investing in property and a car. Her travels further broadened her horizons, and her career flourished, leading to a promotion to senior manager. Anna's captivating qualities, including her intelligence, beauty, slender physique, and radiant smile, drew in numerous admirers. While working at the Wheatley Hotel in Lenox, Massachusetts, she met and fell in love with Marcus O'Neill, the hotel's head chef. Their romance ultimately led to their marriage in 2009, at which point Anna took her husband's last name. Born in July 1975 in Boston, Massachusetts, Brian Paul Walsh came from a prominent, wealthy, and respected family. As a young man, he would frequently borrow money from friends, only to fail to repay them. During his college years, he would invite friends to dine at upscale restaurants, then use various tactics to manipulate others into covering his share of the bill. Brian was estranged from his father, Dr. Thomas Walsh, for many years until the elder's death in 2018. The estrangement dated back to when Brian fraudulently withdrew nearly $1 million from his father's personal account and disappeared with the money. Despite this, Dr. Walsh chose not to report the incident to the police and instead tried to persuade Brian to return the money voluntarily. However, when Brian refused, Dr. Walsh cut off all communication with him. By the time of the theft, Brian's parents had already divorced and his father had started a new family. In response to Brian's actions, Dr. Walsh decided to remove him from his life and will. After Dr. Walsh's passing, Brian reappeared and filed a lawsuit claiming that the will was forged by the doctor's widow and younger children to deny him his rightful inheritance. However, Brian was unable to prove his claims and received no part of the estate. Those who knew Brian described him as greedy, malevolent, and cruel, with a tendency towards violence and a lack of emotional control. He often relied on force to achieve his goals and became dangerous during bouts of anger. In the late 2000s, Brian received treatment in a psychiatric clinic to address his rage issues, during which he was officially diagnosed with sociopathy. Brian and Anna first met in 2014 when Anna was working as a senior reservation manager at the Wheatle Hotel in Massachusetts. At the time, she was married to Marcus O'Neill, who was also employed at the hotel. Brian, who was a guest at the hotel, was immediately drawn to Anna's charm. Despite knowing she was already married, Brian continued to show her increasing attention, which eventually became insistent. Used to getting his way, Brian persisted in pursuing Anna, even after she rejected him. He managed to get her phone number and home address where she lived with her husband and began to harass them relentlessly. In 2015, the Anna were forced to seek police protection from Brian's constant harassment, which continued day and night. Brian would show up at Anna's workplace, call her at home, and send her messages, demanding she leave her husband for him. The situation took a dark turn when Brian threatened to harm Anna and her husband if she didn't comply with his demands. What triggered Anna's change of heart remains unclear, but a year after seeking police protection, she unexpectedly divorced her husband. Months later, Brian became her second husband. They settled into a luxurious home in Casson, Massachusetts, an upscale neighborhood about 20 miles southeast of Boston. They had 3 sons in quick succession, with the boys being 2, 4, and 6 years old at the time of Anna's disappearance. Despite having a demanding job, Anna successfully balanced her career with motherhood, never taking maternity leave. She became the regional general manager at Tishman Speyer, a real estate company, earning a high salary and becoming the primary breadwinner for the family. Due to her frequent business trips to Washington, D.C., she also bought a second home in her name, where she stayed during these trips. To help take care of their children during her absences, Anna relied on visiting nannies. Meanwhile, Brian was unemployed while his wife was building their family and advancing her career. He had spent most of the $1 million he had taken from his father, and all of Anna's acquisitions were registered in her name. As a result, Brian was actively searching for ways to generate effortless income. Before marrying Anna, Brian had formed a connection with a wealthy individual in South Korea, whose family possessed an impressive art collection. After returning to the U.S., Brian maintained this connection and was unexpectedly asked by his friend to assist in selling several Andy Warhol paintings. Instead of just earning a commission, Brian decided to profit from the transaction. He gained access to a series of abstract Warhol paintings titled Shadow and appraised each one, obtaining authenticity certificates. Then, he created copies of both the paintings and documents. Brian found artists who could create precise replicas, convincing them he needed backups, since each original was worth around $250,000. For several years, he successfully sold fake paintings as originals to collectors worldwide. However, one buyer, an expert in Andy Warhol's work, quickly identified a forgery and sued Brian. The FBI investigated, and in April 2021, Brian pleaded guilty to selling counterfeit art. He was placed under house arrest after his lawyer negotiated a deal, requiring him to return the proceeds to the buyers and avoid prison time. Brian was under house arrest, but he was allowed to leave his house twice a day for specific activities. He could drive his children to and from school and had a 2.5-hour window in the morning to visit a limited list of approved places in his neighborhood, such as stores, pharmacies, and dry cleaners, to buy essential items. On December 31st, 2022, Mrs. Anna Walsh mysteriously disappeared. The Walsh family had planned to celebrate New Year's Eve together at home, just the five of them, Anna, Brian, and their three young sons. After the boys went to bed early, Anna and Brian stayed at the dinner table. That evening, Anna posted a message on social media, wishing everyone a happy new year, and hinting that the past year had been tough, but she and Brian were still together. Anna was scheduled to fly to Washington, D.C. for work on January 3rd, but when she failed to show up, her employer Tishman Speyer reported her missing to the police on January 4th. Brian also reported her missing, worried that he hadn't been able to contact her for days. According to Brian, he last saw Anna on January 1st when she woke him up early in the morning, claiming she had to go to work due to some issues and her boss had asked her to come in earlier than planned. He believed she then headed to the airport with only a few belongings. However, several inconsistencies in the case soon arose. For instance, Anna had not bought, changed, or reserved a flight ticket for January 1st, and she had not canceled her scheduled flight for January 3rd. Additionally, she was not seen at the airport on either January 1st or 3rd. Furthermore, it was unclear how she left the house since her personal car was still in the garage and she had not called a taxi. Brian's suggestion that she might have hitchhiked was not convincing. Brian's statements and behavior sparked numerous questions. His explanations were contradictory, and he didn't appear particularly concerned about the unfolding events. Despite being unable to contact the mother of his children for over 3 days, he only reported her missing on the 4th day, and only after her workplace called. From the start, Mr. Walsh was considered a prime suspect, yet law enforcement didn't have enough evidence to arrest him or obtain a warrant to search their family home. They conducted a limited inspection with the homeowner's permission, but it didn't yield any results. Brian claimed to have led a normal life during those 3 days, visiting usual stores and doing household chores. However, verifying his claims was challenging, as he often left the house without his phone, which he alleged was frequently taken by his older children to play games without his permission. On January 5th, the police issued a public appeal on TV, showing a photo of Anna and asking anyone who knew her whereabouts or what had happened to her to contact the authorities immediately. However, no one came forward with any information. The last time Anna had been in touch with anyone was on December 31st, when she made phone calls to her mother and sister. Her husband was the last person known to have seen her. Surveillance cameras in the neighborhood did not capture any footage of Anna on the morning of January 1st, making it seem as though she had never left her home. In contrast, her husband was recorded leaving and returning to their home several times, but it was impossible to determine where he had gone. His claim of visiting a supermarket was proven to be false, as his vehicle was not seen on any routes to the store, and he was not spotted inside. It wasn't until January 8th that Brian was arrested for making false statements and was taken in for questioning at the police station. His home was finally searched, and it was discovered that on January 1st, he had visited a hardware store in a different area, which was not on the list of approved locations he was allowed to visit while under house arrest. At the hardware store, Brian spent nearly $500 on a large quantity of cleaning supplies, including plastic sheeting, duct tape, a mop and bucket, and utility rags. He paid in cash, likely hoping to keep his visit secret. During a search of the Walsh family home, disturbing discoveries were made. Although the house appeared normal at first, with no signs of struggle or bloodstains, the basement told a different story. Law enforcement officers found smeared bloodstains everywhere, along with a bloodied knife and saw wrapped in towels, hidden among the clutter. Brian had previously admitted to visiting his mother's home on January 3rd, claiming he needed to help her with household tasks due to her poor health. However, after the grim discoveries in the basement, police suspected that Walsh may have disposed of evidence or parts of his deceased wife's body on his way there. They inspected trash bins in the area where the couple lived, as well as along the road to his mother's house, and found a kitchen hatchet with dried blood and several blood-stained towels, similar to those found in the Walsh basement. Forensic analysis confirmed that the blood in the basement on the towels, knife, hatchet, and saw belonged to Anna, confirming her death. The seized laptop and tablet revealed a disturbing search history. Weeks prior to his wife's disappearance, Brian had been actively searching online for information on the most favorable states for divorce in terms of property division. He also looked into whether he could claim the second home in Washington, D.C., which was owned by Anna and registered solely in her name, suggesting a possible motive for the crime. One of the earliest searches, made around 4 a.m. on January 1st, was about how long it takes for a body to decompose. This was followed by nearly 24 searches on how to dispose of a body, including how to clean up blood traces, how to dismember a body, and whether a body could be identified if the teeth were removed. He also searched for information on how long DNA traces last and whether a person could be charged with a crime if the body was never found. All of these searches were conducted on his young child's tablet. By January 3rd, Brian's searches had shifted to inheritance, as he looked into how and when someone can inherit the property of a person who has disappeared. This suggests that he was confident he would avoid punishment and was preparing to claim the inheritance. On January 18th, Brian was officially accused of murdering his wife, even though her body or remains had not been discovered. Prosecutors allege that on New Year's Day, Brian intentionally or accidentally killed his wife, then decided to get rid of her body by dismembering it in their home's basement. He allegedly put the body parts in plastic bags and threw them away in trash cans located in different areas of the city. The area surrounding the Walsh home, as well as nearby empty lands, wooded areas, and bodies of water, were extensively searched for evidence, but nothing was found. The defendant, Brian Walsh, has pleaded not guilty and is refusing to reveal what happened to Anna's body. Recently, Anna had been unhappy and was considering divorcing her husband, which she mentioned several times during phone calls with her mother and sister the day before she vanished. However, her mother did not take Anna's threats seriously and decided to put off her visit. The trial is ongoing, and Brian is being held at the Norfolk Correctional Facility as he awaits his next court date. Anna's mother is following the investigation from her home in Serbia and has not traveled to the United States. The Serbian Ministry of Foreign Affairs has contacted the New York consulate, which is in touch with the Norfolk District Attorney's Office to ensure Anna's mother is kept informed about the investigation and hearings. Brian and Anna's 3 sons are now in state custody because none of Brian's family members are willing to care for them. They cite Anna's mother's age and poor health, and her sister, who lives in Canada, has also declined to take in her nephews. The only person willing to take the boys in is Pamela Bond, a close friend of Anna's, who prefers this to them being separated and placed in different foster homes. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Belinda Temple. 1986 was the year Belinda started her college education in her hometown. Unlike her twin sister Brenda, who attended Steve Austin University, Belinda stayed close to home. Her decision was largely influenced by her relationship with Marshall Kelmy, who was 3 years her senior. Belinda was deeply infatuated with Marshall, and this relationship began during her high school years. However, Belinda's parents were not in favor of this relationship. They feared that being involved with Marshall would hinder their daughter's opportunities for a prestigious education. They also worried about the potential consequences of an early pregnancy, which might lead to Belinda dropping out of college altogether. The disapproval of Belinda's parents led to numerous arguments at home. Belinda's mother was particularly opposed to the idea of her daughter moving in with Marshall before marriage. She made her stance clear by stating, "He is nobody to you. Once you're married, you can move out, but until then, you have a home here." This remark seemed to only strengthen Belinda's resolve. In a bold move, Belinda and Marshall announced their decision to get married during a family dinner. Despite the tension, they shared their plans, which was met with a heavy, uncomfortable silence. Belinda's mother was visibly upset but seemed resigned to their decision, gritting her teeth and remaining silent for the rest of the evening. In reality, Belinda had made up her mind to marry Marshall as a way to assert her independence and prove to her parents that she was capable of making her own decisions. They didn't have a grand wedding celebration. Belinda wore her sister's white dress, invited a few close friends, and she and Marshall signed the papers. Afterward, they strolled around the city, enjoying champagne and each other's company. The next day, Belinda packed her belongings and moved in with her husband, who was still living with his parents. They hadn't planned to rent a separate place. Getting married didn't change much in their relationship. As mentioned earlier, Belinda's primary reason for marrying was to gain independence and stop her mother's nagging. However, her new life turned out to be quite unpleasant. Less than 6 months later, Marshall started spending less time at home, claiming he was working late. In reality, he was seeing another woman. Belinda discovered this when she noticed her husband acting strangely. One day, she waited until his work hours ended and followed him, which is when the truth came to light. She saw Marshall walking hand in hand with a woman she didn't know, likely a colleague. The deceived wife, Belinda, left her husband, Marshall, after discovering his infidelity. She didn't create a scene, but instead packed her belongings and returned to her mother's house. Marshall tried to win her back, but Belinda was too proud to forgive him. They eventually got a divorce. A few years later, Belinda was pregnant and working part-time at a school. Despite her pregnancy, she was concerned about missing the upcoming basketball competition between schools and not being able to prepare her team properly. Her colleague, Richard Bachman, didn't share her enthusiasm and had often expressed his disinterest in teaching. Belinda couldn't understand why Bachman, a 40-year-old man who seemed uninvested in his job, still held his position. As a diligent teacher, Belinda noticed that one of her students, Riley Jo Sanders, a high school senior, had been absent from class for months. She reached out to her colleagues to determine if the issue was specific to her class or if Sanders was a habitual truant. Her colleagues told her that Sanders came from a troubled home and rarely attended school, implying that his absences were not Belinda's problem. That evening, Belinda decided to take further action. She visited Riley Jo Sanders' mother, who lived nearby, and had a serious conversation with her. Although the talk seemed to have an impact, it didn't quite yield the results Belinda had hoped for. Sanders began attending class and participating on an equal level with his peers. However, during a basketball game, when Belinda called out Sanders for pushing an opponent and exhibiting poor behavior, he responded with insults and threats, warning her to be careful, especially in the evenings. After her breakup with Marshall, Belinda had nothing left for her in her hometown. She decided to follow her sister to Stephen F. Austin State University. It was there that Belinda found her true calling. Alongside her studies, she worked part-time as a basketball coach and had high aspirations. At the same university, Belinda met David Temple. Like her, he was a part-time coach but for soccer, and he also played for the university team as its captain. Soccer had been an integral part of David's life since childhood, and it was clear even then that he was destined to excel. He consistently performed well for his team, earning the respect of all his teachers. Despite his difficult nature, which could lead him to insult or even physically confront others, David's behavior was often overlooked because of his on-field performance. During games, he would become fully engaged and find it difficult to calm down for a long time afterward. However, one of his teammates later revealed that David's aggressive behavior was due to his use of steroids. David's behavior changed significantly when he was with Belinda. He became a caring and chivalrous partner, but with one major caveat: he would become aggressive and confrontational if he perceived anyone as a threat to their relationship. Belinda was well received by David's parents, who admired her love for sports, a common interest she shared with their son. However, Belinda's twin sister and friends were less than thrilled about her relationship with David. They had known Belinda as a strong-willed and independent person, but since being with David, she had become more subdued and focused on pleasing him. Her relationship with her family also suffered, with less frequent phone calls and visits, which naturally caused concern among her loved ones. As graduation approached, David and Belinda adopted a bull terrier named Shaq. After receiving their diplomas, they got married in 1999. January 1999, David and Belinda Temple were expecting their second child. With the due date nearing, doctors predicted Belinda would go into labor within a couple of weeks. As with many pregnant women, Belinda was frequently exhausted, and caring for their son Evan added to her fatigue. One evening, David decided to give his wife a break from household chores and allow her some rest. To minimize distractions, David took Evan for a walk in the park. As they strolled through the fresh air, their hunger grew, so they stopped at a cafe for a snack. After their cafe visit, David and Evan headed home. Upon arrival, David noticed the front door had broken glass. He quickly told Evan, "I'm going to take you to visit Harland for a bit, okay?" Without waiting for Evan's response, David led him to a neighbor's house, where family friends lived. Evan, struggling to keep up, asked, "Why can't we go to Mom's?" David, unsure of how to respond, said, "Mom's in the hospital right now." The neighbor, Quentin Harland, had just opened the door to unexpected visitors when David rushed past him, taking his son into the living room without a word. David then ran towards his own house, leaving Quentin confused. Quentin shouted to his wife to care for the child and followed David. "What's going on?" Quentin asked, but before David could respond, they reached David's house, where Quentin saw the front door was broken. Upon entering, Quentin saw the house was in disarray, with open closets and belongings scattered everywhere. A trail of blood led to the stairs, prompting Quentin to push David aside. Under the stairs, in the dressing room, they found Belinda lying face down with a severe head wound. David, seemingly in shock, didn't react. Instead, he took out his phone and called the police. Police officers quickly arrived at the scene, but they were initially unable to enter the house due to the Temple family's aggressive bull terrier, Shaq, who growled and barked at the unfamiliar men in uniform. One officer drew his gun in response, but David intervened, shouting at them to put their guns away and rushing to restrain the dog in the garage. Upon entering the house, the police assessed the scene and concluded that the perpetrators were likely burglars who had not expected Belinda to be home. Despite her pregnancy, they had shot her to eliminate her as a witness. When police started investigating a crime scene, they were baffled by how the burglar got past the fierce dog, Shaq, that guarded the house. They were also unsure how the perpetrator distracted the dog. Upon closer inspection of the front door, police found broken glass, but its positioning suggested it was broken while the door was already unlocked, which seemed strange. Inside the living room, a box on the nightstand caught their eye, containing jewelry such as earrings, rings, and a gold chain. What puzzled them was why the thief left the jewelry untouched. As police spent more time in the Temple family home, they became increasingly convinced that the whole scene was staged. In their experience, thieves usually take all valuables they can carry, but in this case, nothing appeared to be missing. The presence of the dog continued to raise suspicions, leaving them feeling that something was off. Regarding the murder, Belinda was shot in the back of the head with what was likely a 12-gauge shotgun while kneeling with their back to the killer. However, shotguns are an unusual choice for robbers due to their bulk and difficulty in concealing and transporting. This, combined with the fact that the murder took place at 4 p.m., makes it improbable that a thief would be openly carrying a shotgun at that time of day. When questioned by police about firearms in his home, David mentioned owning a couple of rifles, which he showed to the officers. Notably, the shotgun that could have been used in Belinda's murder was not among the firearms he presented. David went to the police station voluntarily to give a statement and detail the items that had been stolen. Despite appearing nervous, he was cooperative with the police. During this time, his son Evan stayed at Quentin's house, oblivious to what had happened. In 1996, David Temple and Quentin Harland were neighbors and co-workers at a school. They were close friends and often socialized together outside of work, watching sports and hosting barbecues with their families. However, their friendship became strained when Heather Scott, a new teacher, joined the school. Quentin was attracted to Heather, but she rejected his invitation to dinner. What Quentin didn't know was that David had also developed feelings for Heather, and they started a secret relationship. Quentin was angry and hurt when he found out that his married friend, who had a son, was involved with someone else. Despite his feelings, Quentin kept David's secret, even as their co-workers began to notice the romantic connection between David and Heather outside of school. Heather didn't know that David was married, as he didn't wear a wedding ring and kept his personal life private. Belinda had no idea about David's secret life. She once confided in Quentin about her suspicions that David was cheating on her, but Quentin quickly dismissed her concerns. "You're just being paranoid," he told her. "David is a devoted husband and family man. How could you think such a thing?" However, there were signs that something was off. David, who had once been extremely respectful towards Belinda, now frequently insulted her, even in front of others. He would call her fat, despite her only gaining a little weight after childbirth, and would often ask her to leave the room when they had guests, implying that her appearance was embarrassing. Belinda didn't stand up for herself or have a serious conversation with David about his behavior. Instead, she cried at night and felt deeply unhappy as a woman. Meanwhile, David was enjoying his new relationship with Heather. David became increasingly estranged from his family due to a new relationship with a coworker. He put more psychological pressure on his wife, Belinda, and their communication consisted only of insults. Although he never physically harmed her, the verbal abuse continued. That year, Belinda discovered she was pregnant again. The news made her forgive David's past transgressions, and she felt ecstatic. David attempted to appear as a happy father, but it seemed insincere. Sometimes, he would not come home at night, and Belinda was afraid to ask why because she feared his angry outbursts and the potential scandal that could follow. A pregnant Belinda often asked her husband David for help in preparing for the baby's birth, such as running errands, fixing up the nursery, and installing shelves. However, David consistently ignored her requests, leaving Belinda to handle everything on her own, including shopping, painting, and assembling furniture, despite being 8 months pregnant. As Christmas approached, Belinda suggested discussing gift ideas with David, but he proposed skipping gifts that year to save money for the baby. Given the doctor's warning that Belinda might go into premature labor, this seemed like a reasonable decision. However, on Christmas, David didn't even get Belinda a small gift. Instead, he announced that he was leaving to spend the New Year's holidays with friends on a hunting trip. Belinda confided in her sister, who immediately changed her plans to be with Belinda, ensuring she wouldn't feel abandoned, especially since labor could start at any moment. David, during the holidays, spent the time with Heather, who wore a gold necklace given to her by David as a Christmas gift. By 2007, it appeared that David Temple had all but moved on from his wife's murder, as if Belinda had never been a part of his life. The fact that it had been 5 years since the murder and the killer had yet to be caught seemed of little concern to him. He had married Heather in 2001, and together they were raising Evan. The police suspected David of wrongdoing, but they couldn't gather enough evidence to prove anything. While investigating the case files of burglaries in the neighborhood, they discovered that a house on the next street had been burglarized 8 days before the murder at the Temple house. The perpetrator was none other than Riley Joe Sanders, a persistent truant from the school where Belinda taught, who had previously threatened her. He was called in for questioning immediately. Riley had no alibi for the day of the murder, and his father owned a 12-gauge shotgun. However, when the police searched the Sanders house, they did not find the weapon. Realizing the police had reason to detain him, Riley confessed that he was with friends on the day of the murder. He had hidden this information because they were smoking pot in a large group, and he did not want to implicate his friends. As a result, the charge against Riley was dropped. In November 2004, police officers arrived at David's doorstep, handcuffed him, and informed him that he was being held on suspicion of murdering Belinda Temple. David denied the allegations. His trial began in 2007. The investigation revealed that David's motive for the crime was his new relationship with Heather. Colleagues of David testified that during Belinda's pregnancy, he boasted about replacing his fat and pregnant wife with the younger and more attractive Heather. According to the prosecution, David killed Belinda as soon as she returned home from work, as evidenced by her still wearing her work uniform and shoes. They alleged that he then staged a robbery, scattering belongings around the house, before quickly driving to the park with his son to create an alibi. The prosecution also highlighted several suspicious facts, including that nothing was stolen from the house, and a fierce dog in the yard would have prevented any stranger from entering. Furthermore, witnesses reported seeing David's car stopped near a rice paddy, where the murder weapon was likely discarded, with only his son Evan present in the vehicle at the time. However, the shotgun was never found in the area where the crime occurred. Heather testified that before Belinda's murder, her relationship with David was not serious, and she didn't even love him. This statement introduced uncertainty into the jury's decision, as it raised questions about David's motive. Would he really kill his wife over a non-serious relationship, or was Heather lying to protect him? In November 2007, David was sentenced to life in prison. 2 years later, a friend of Riley Sanders came forward to the police to clear David's conscience. According to this friend, Riley had previously confided in him about taking his father's shotgun with the intention of robbing the Temple family home. Riley wanted to teach his teacher, David Temple, a lesson. Riley claimed that he had almost entered the house but was thwarted by a bull terrier that ran out of the garage. He shot at the dog but missed, and fearing the noise would attract neighbors, he quickly ran away. This new testimony was submitted to the court, prompting a review of the case. David was released from prison on bail while the review was underway. Meanwhile, Heather decided she no longer wanted to be married to someone who had spent so much time in jail and whose future was uncertain. She filed for divorce. The jury took a long time to deliberate on David's sentence. The case wasn't revisited until 2023, when David was still awaiting a final decision on his sentence. David was ultimately convicted and received a life sentence with the possibility of parole after 17 years. Throughout the trial, his son Evan struggled to accept that his father was capable of committing such a heinous crime. Evan continued to support his father until the very end. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Kelly Clayton. Kelly Clayton, also known as Kelly Stage Clayton, resides in Cotton, New York. Kelly Clayton had a promising life ahead of her. In high school, she was an exemplary student, excelling academically and serving as a role model for her peers. Her academic achievements were impressive, and she passed exams with ease. Despite her academic focus, Kelly's appearance was often described as model-like, and she could have pursued a career in modeling if she had chosen to do so. Following high school, Kelly enrolled in a teacher training university to become a chemistry teacher, which brought immense pride to her parents. However, after a few years, Kelly suddenly lost interest in her studies. It is unclear what triggered this change, but she eventually withdrew from the university and informed her parents that she no longer wanted to pursue a teaching career. Kelly felt that she was too young to be confined to a life of grading notebooks and managing classrooms. Instead, she expressed a desire to travel and experience life to the fullest. Her parents were disappointed and upset by her decision, leading to a 6-month estrangement from their daughter. Kelly's life took an unexpected turn when she met Tom Clayton at a party hosted by mutual friends. Tom was immediately smitten with Kelly and began showering her with attention. His athletic physique and attractive appearance made him a standout, which wasn't surprising given his successful hockey career. As a semi-professional player for the Jackal team, Tom was known for his strength and aggression on the ice. However, he realized his hockey career would eventually end due to physical limitations. Tom would have to retire and enjoy the game from the sidelines, either by attending live matches or watching his favorite team on television. They continued with their lives, starting by returning to New York to get married. They then moved to North Carolina and eventually settled in the small town of Cato, which had only a few thousand residents. Tom started a franchise that specialized in rebuilding houses damaged by fires or disasters. He also worked for a friend's company in a related field. Kelly, on the other hand, had dropped out of university and was working as a waitress. Although she changed jobs, she continued to work even after having 2 children. Tom's income was sufficient for the family, and Kelly could have quit her job to care for their daughters, but she chose to continue working to earn extra money. She used this extra income to buy toys and pamper her children. On September 28, 2015, Tom went to play poker with his friends, the Millers, as he usually did. He preferred to attend these gatherings alone, as playing for money required a certain level of skill and experience. Additionally, someone had to stay home with the children, and bringing the whole family would have turned the evening into a noisy and chaotic affair, detracting from the enjoyment of the game. That evening, Tom was on a losing streak, but instead of giving up, he tried to win back his losses. He suggested that anyone who wanted to stay and play until morning was welcome to do so, but no one took him up on the offer, and he ended up going home. At home, a horrific scene unfolded before Tom's eyes. His wife lay in a pool of her own blood, severely beaten and, at first glance, appeared lifeless. Panicked, Tom frantically searched the rooms for his children. Fortunately, they were unharmed but terrified. He quickly scooped up his daughters and rushed to his neighbor Derek's house, desperate to shield them from the gruesome sight of their mother's battered body. From Derek's house, Tom called the police, struggling to process the chaos. The officer who arrived at the scene found Tom kneeling beside his wife's body, attempting to administer CPR. However, the emergency medical technicians soon intervened and pulled Tom away, revealing the devastating truth: Kelly had been deceased for an extended period, and nothing could be done to revive her. The house was in disarray, with blood covering both floors. The bedroom showed signs of an intense struggle between Kelly and her killer, who carried out the brutal act despite the presence of children in the house. It appeared Kelly had been pushed down the stairs, as evidenced by the broken banister, and brutally beaten with a blunt object until the killer was certain she was dead. No signs of knife or gunshot wounds were found. The officer filming the crime scene observed that Tom seemed lost and in shock. He wandered aimlessly, briefly entering the room before exiting, and was unable to provide the officer with basic information, such as the location of the children's room or the emergency exit. However, when asked about his whereabouts during the murder, Tom calmly stated he had spent the evening at a friend's house playing poker. The officer, failing to obtain clear information from Tom, proceeded to question the neighbor and the children. Tom's eldest daughter, Charlie, described the perpetrator as a robber. According to Charlie, she and her sister were drifting off to sleep when they heard their mother scream loudly from the next room. Their mother yelled, "Charlie, run away from here," and then the whole house shook violently. They cautiously left their room and saw the perpetrator leaning over their mother, beating her with what looked like a hammer. They ran back into the nursery, blocked the door with a small nightstand, and hid under the bed. Fortunately, the perpetrator wasn't looking for them, as the nightstand wouldn't have been enough to stop him. When asked to describe the perpetrator, Charlie said he was big, like a bear. He wore blue jeans, a black shirt, and a mask similar to the one her father wears when hunting. Charlie also noted that the perpetrator's eyes looked like her father's, but she didn't remember anything else, as she only caught a brief glimpse before getting scared and running away. Police officers investigating the house couldn't find evidence to support her claim that the perpetrator was a burglar. There were no signs of forced entry at the front or back doors, but the garage gate was open, which could have been an entry point. However, nothing was stolen from the house, including jewelry and cash, and the cabinets were all closed. This was unusual, as burglars typically search every area. Officers quickly suspected that Tom, was involved in the murder. They believed he was pretending to be a grieving husband and had actually killed his wife to collect insurance payments. If Kelly's life was insured, Tom could potentially receive up to $1 million. The police just needed to gather evidence to solve the case, especially since the daughter mentioned that the perpetrator's mask and eyes resembled her father's. However, the police couldn't find the hunting mask in the house. After discovering Tom's whereabouts on the night in question, the police interviewed the other poker players. One of Tom's friends was incredulous. "You think Tom is the killer? That's unbelievable. His wife was just murdered, and instead of finding the real culprit, you're focusing on him." Another friend, less emotional, chimed in, "Tom couldn't have done it. He worked 2 jobs non-stop because he loved Kelly and their kids. It's just not possible. Besides, he was with us the entire night, playing poker. Even when everyone else was tired, he wanted to keep playing." Laura, an acquaintance of Tom's, shared her concerns during a break in the game. She recalled that Tom had asked to borrow her phone, claiming he had left his in the car, which was only 10 meters away. Laura found this odd but lent him her phone anyway. Tom stepped outside to make the call, but when Laura checked her phone's call history later, there was no record of the call, suggesting that Tom had deleted it. Laura discussed this incident with her husband, who had been sitting next to Tom at the poker table. He noticed that Tom wasn't paying attention to the game, instead keeping his head down, focusing on something on the table. It turned out that Tom had his phone with him the whole time, which raised more questions. Why did Tom borrow Laura's phone if he had his own? Who was he trying to call, and why couldn't he use his own phone? After Laura's testimony, the police re-questioned Charlie, Tom's daughter, and she reiterated that the robber resembled her father. The next testimony came from the niece of Kelly. She explained that she hadn't told her Aunt Kelly about Tom's true nature because she didn't want to upset Kelly. Aunt Kelly adored Tom. The niece felt her truth wasn't needed, implying that it wouldn't change anything. The niece saw Tom as a person with 2 sides. On the surface, he appeared caring and attentive, often showering Aunt Kelly with attention and gifts, and even helping with childcare, which is more than many fathers do. However, his behavior at work revealed a completely different personality. Recognizing her niece's concerns about being young and alone, Aunt Kelly had set up a job for her with Tom the previous summer. During her employment, the niece handled tasks such as correspondence, registration, and managing documents. At first, her interactions with Tom were strictly professional, mainly because she didn't know him well before working for him. One day, Tom got drunk and came to the office, revealing to the niece that his family life was a facade. He confessed to loving his daughters, but not his wife, Aunt Kelly. He had been unfaithful, having multiple affairs during their marriage, and considered leaving her but stayed due to financial concerns. It was later also confirmed by female participants of a poker game that Tom was indeed unfaithful, having relationships with 2 women present at the game. Additionally, Kelly's 16-year-old niece shared information about Michael Beard, another employee of Tom's firm. Michael was doing repair work on houses after a fire, but there were frequent reports of items going missing from the houses where he worked. Tom initially doubted his customers when they accused Michael Beard of theft during fire restoration jobs. However, as the complaints continued, it became clear that Michael was indeed stealing from clients. Additionally, there were allegations of Michael showing up to work intoxicated. When Tom finally confronted Michael about his behavior, he was understandably upset and disappointed. Despite having every right to be angry, Tom took a surprisingly compassionate approach. Instead of simply firing Michael and cutting ties, Tom actively reached out to other companies and recommended Michael for a job. When none of those opportunities panned out, Tom took it a step further and offered Michael work around his own house, doing odd jobs like cutting the grass, watering plants, and making minor repairs. This decision showed that Tom was willing to give Michael a second chance, even if it meant finding alternative employment for his former employee. The detective brought Michael Beard in for questioning. Michael claimed he only stole because he and his family were in dire need of money. He expressed his gratitude towards Tom, his former employer, who had always defended him. Michael also praised Tom's wife, who had shown kindness by feeding him and giving his children old clothes. However, the investigation took a turn when Michael's wife, Holly, was interrogated. She revealed that Tom had offered Michael a job, which Michael had not mentioned earlier, and promised to pay him $10,000 for it. This new information raised suspicions about Michael's alibi. He was called back to the station and hooked up to a lie detector. The test results indicated that Michael was lying, and he eventually cracked under pressure and began to confess. The investigation was sparked by the death of Kelly, which had shaken Michael. He had even attended church to pray for her soul, showing that he was genuinely distraught by her passing. Despite initial doubts about his involvement, the police had released him after the first round of questioning. However, Holly's testimony changed everything. Tom promised Michael $10,000 to kill his wife, Kelly, and make it look like an accident. The plan was for Michael to sneak into the house while Tom was playing poker, strangle Kelly, and then start a fire to cover up the crime. The house was insured for a large sum of money. Michael found 2 cans of gasoline waiting for him in the garage, which he would use to set the fire. He quietly entered the house while everyone was asleep. He crept upstairs to Kelly's bedroom, but she was either awake or woken by the sound of the door. She saw Michael and began screaming. Kelly's screaming startled Michael, and he tried to strangle her. However, Kelly was stronger than she appeared and fought back. A fierce struggle ensued, moving from the bedroom to the kitchen. Michael was surprised by Kelly's strength, which made the fight much more intense than he had anticipated. Michael was in a state of shock and panic, flailing his arms wildly and grabbing at Kelly's clothes, unable to focus on the fight. In contrast, Kelly was fighting for her life, accurately aiming her blows at Michael's face. If the police had arrived at Michael's location sooner, they would have seen evidence of the beating he had taken. After a prolonged struggle, Michael slammed Kelly's head into the wall with great force, knocking her to the ground. She was unable to get up for some time. Michael then produced a hammer and continued to strike Kelly's head until she showed no signs of life. Consumed by rage and panic, Michael fled the house, forgetting that Tom had instructed him not only to kill Kelly but also to set fire to the house to conceal the crime. Mark Blandford, Michael's accomplice, was just the driver. Knowing Michael from working together and staying with him, Mark had not been surprised when Michael, known for petty theft, had asked him to drive during a break-in. Mark had mentioned that he had initially wanted to decline Michael's request, but that the offer of $500 had been tempting. After some deliberation, Michael had convinced him to participate. Michael's plan had been to rob a businessman, and he had needed Mark's assistance to make a quick getaway before the police arrived. Michael had also promised to help with the car. Mark had eventually agreed, but only on the condition that he could park the car at a safe distance from the house. Michael had accepted this condition. That evening, Mark had waited for Michael in the car in a dark alley, and Michael had come back quickly enough, breathing heavily and telling him to move as fast as possible. Michael hadn't had any bag or sack on him, which hadn't looked much like a robbery. Mark hadn't asked him any questions along the way, simply because he hadn't wanted to know anything. He had just wanted his $500, which he hadn't ended up getting. On the way out, Michael had asked Mark to stop at a bridge over a creek a couple blocks south of there. Mark had stopped there, and Michael had hastily stripped off his outer garments and thrown them off the bridge. Mark had offered to show the place if needed. Indeed, police officers who had arrived on the scene at Mark's behest had found parts of Michael's outer clothing near the creek, as well as the hammer used to kill Kelly. Michael, already in custody on suspicion of first-degree murder, began to change his testimony. According to him, he was indeed hired by Tom, indeed for $10,000, but only to commit arson at the house and nothing more. Michael spent a very long time assuring the police of his innocence, and all because he did not know that Mark had shown the place where Michael had thrown out his things, and that his clothes, as well as the murder weapon, had already been submitted for examination. And the experts found both on his clothes and on the hammer the blood of Kelly Clayton. And that was the most direct proof that it was him who killed Kelly, not someone else. Tom denied ordering the massacre of his wife, claiming Michael acted alone. According to Tom, Michael knew Tom had money and was motivated by resentment over losing his job. Tom suggested Michael robbed his house, unaware Kelly was home, resulting in her death. However, Laura, a woman who played poker with Tom, revealed that Tom used her cell phone to make a call. The detective obtained the call records, confirming suspicions. The records showed Tom called Michael on the night of September 28th to 29th. Michael was tried first and maintained he was hired to set fire to the house for insurance purposes. He claimed he didn't kill Kelly and the blood on his clothes came from touching her dead body. He had disposed of his belongings to avoid suspicion of being at the Claytons' house that night. His testimony seemed convincing. The jury deliberated for 7 hours before delivering a guilty verdict on all counts against Michael Beard, who now faced life imprisonment. In contrast, Tom's lawyers managed to gather records of conversations and correspondence between Tom and Michael, but none of these clearly mentioned their nefarious plan. Furthermore, the prosecution's attempts to obtain billing transcripts of Tom's movements yielded no concrete evidence. All the evidence against Tom was circumstantial. However, one key detail caught the attention of investigators. The car in which Mark had given Michael a ride was registered to Tom's company. Moreover, on the day of the incident, Tom had arrived at the office in his personal Toyota but then switched to the company's pickup truck, which was later driven to Michael's house and left there. The truck was returned to the office the day after the tragedy. This suggested that Tom had, in fact, provided Michael with the car that he and Mark used to commit the crime. It was a crucial piece of evidence that the jury testified to during the trial. The 6-day trial concluded with the jury finding Tom guilty of hiring Michael to commit the heinous crime. Michael subsequently appealed, using the testimony of young Charlie, who claimed that the eyes behind the mask belonged to her father. However, the court dismissed the appeal due to the matching description of the clothing found under the bridge. Consequently, Tom Clayton and Michael Beard were sentenced to life in prison. Mark received a 4-year prison sentence for manslaughter. The custody of Tom and Kelly's children was awarded to Kelly's sister, Kim. With time, Charlie has learned to cope with the tragedy. Although she occasionally remembers her mother, she refuses to discuss her father, whom she will never want to see again. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Kelsey Smith. Kelsey Smith was born on May 3, 1989, in Overland Park, Kansas. Kelsey was the third of 5 children in a close-knit family. Her parents, Gregory and Missy Smith, raised her alongside her siblings, Steve, Lindsay, Kat, and Zach. Gregory Smith, the family patriarch, was a retired U.S. Navy veteran and had served in the police force for over 20 years. He was enjoying his retirement after a long and dedicated career. Kelsey grew up in a loving family environment, close to all her siblings. Kelsey's mother, Missy Smith, has dedicated her life to health care, working at a local hospital for many years. Despite her busy career, she has managed to balance work and family life well, raising her children and creating a warm family environment. Kelsey has been an active, outgoing, and creative child since she was a child. She enjoyed singing, dancing, and playing musical instruments, which she learned in music school. She was also active in school theater and choir performances. Kelsey is also passionate about sports, especially gymnastics and soccer. She often attends sporting events with her father and brother, cheering on her local team. With a great sense of humor and many talents, Kelsey has left a deep impression on those around her. Her love for animals, which began in childhood, inspired her dream of becoming a veterinarian after college. During her senior year of high school, Kelsey found work at the local symphony orchestra, where she played the clarinet at various city events. Through this job, she set a goal of saving enough money within 6 months to buy her first car, a 1987 Buick Regal. Although her parents were concerned that the car was an older model, they offered to contribute to the cost so that Kelsey could buy a newer car from the family budget. However, Kelsey was determined to buy her first car herself, using only her own savings, so she turned down their offer. The Kelsey family prioritized providing their children with a well-rounded education, focusing on education and personal development. They also instilled in their children a strong sense of discipline. The family had clear rules that everyone followed without exception, including sharing their plans and notifying each other if they would be out late. Kelsey demonstrates her adherence to these rules by being punctual, sharing her whereabouts with her parents, and informing them of her social activities. During her senior year, Kelsey began a romantic relationship with John Beer Smith. She describes it as deeply in love and like the relationships depicted in books or movies. They celebrated New Year's 2007 together and have been virtually inseparable ever since. John, who is 1 year older than her, appears to be a responsible and caring partner who treats Kelsey with respect. Both sets of parents approve of their relationship. In May 2007, Kelsey turned 18, graduated from high school, and was accepted into a prestigious university in Kansas to study veterinary medicine. This was one of the happiest times of her life. However, these happy days did not last long. Kelsey attended parties with her classmates to celebrate the end of high school and enjoyed spending time with John. At this point, Kelsey had achieved everything she wanted, got into her dream college, and was in a fulfilling relationship with a wonderful partner who was planning to propose. Her life was bright and happy. However, her disappearance from a shopping mall parking lot on June 2, 2007 changed everything. Kelsey and her boyfriend John were about to celebrate a big milestone, 6 months of dating. To make it special, John planned to propose with a custom-made engagement ring and had booked a romantic dinner for they of them. Unaware of John's plans, Kelsey also wanted to surprise him with a gift. That Saturday, she got ready, drove to a nearby Target Corporation store, and called her mother around 7 p.m. to say she had found the gift but needed a special bag for it. Her mother suggested checking the mall across the street from Target Corporation for a romantic gift bag. Kelsey thanked her mother for the advice and promised to be home soon. John was supposed to pick her up at 8 o'clock. However, after that conversation with her mother never heard from Kelsey again. Kelsey failed to return home. When John arrived at 8 with a large bouquet of flowers, he was shocked and frightened to discover Kelsey's absence. Her parents were equally terrified, as it was unlike Kelsey to ignore phone calls and texts. She had vanished in a busy area during the daytime, and no one had witnessed her disappearance. Kelsey's father and two eldest siblings began searching for her. They found her car parked at the Oak Park Mall, which gave them a glimmer of hope that she might still be inside the mall for some unknown reason. However, after thoroughly searching the mall, inquiring with salespeople and security guards, they concluded that Kelsey was not there. Upon returning to the car, they found it undisturbed with no signs of struggle or violence. Kelsey's father, a former police officer, decided not to touch anything to preserve potential evidence, as the car might be part of a crime scene. Kelsey's parents reported her missing to the police the same day, but the police were initially hesitant to start searching right away. They explained that since Kelsey was 18, she wouldn't be considered missing until 24 hours had passed. However, Kelsey's father, who had connections, insisted on an immediate search. He also asked hospitals in the city if a woman matching Kelsey's description had been admitted. That evening, the police interviewed Kelsey's family and John to confirm their whereabouts and rule them out as suspects, a standard procedure in missing person cases. The police also reviewed surveillance footage from the Target store, which showed Kelsey entering the store, browsing, making a purchase, and leaving while talking on the phone to her mother. She was asking her mother about a gift bag and then drove to the Oak Park Mall across the street, as her mother suggested. Kelsey parked her car near the side entrance of the mall, close to the wall. Her car was inspected by experts and appeared to be untouched from the outside. The gift for John was on the passenger seat, and her backpack with personal items, including a tablet and wallet with $300 in cash, was in the back. Since everything was still inside, robbery was quickly ruled out as a motive. It appears Kelsey only left with her credit cards and phone, as everything else was still in the car. There were no signs of struggle, blood, or damage, and the only unknown fingerprint was found on the driver's seatbelt, which did not belong to Kelsey, her family, or boyfriend. The investigation tried to track Kelsey's location through her mobile phone signal, but the device was inaccessible, possibly turned off or damaged. Despite this, it was possible to determine the last known location of the phone to narrow the search area. However, Verizon Communications, the wireless carrier, delayed providing the necessary data for several days. Instead of refusing to cooperate, the company kept promising to look into the matter, which effectively slowed down the process. In 2007, telecom companies were permitted to keep subscriber information from law enforcement, including police and FBI, without a court order. They based this on data protection laws. Not even situations where someone's life was in danger were exempt from this rule. A closer look at surveillance footage revealed a disturbing detail: a mysterious stranger was stalking Kelsey. The man initially did not attract attention because he kept a safe distance and did not interact directly with Kelsey. He was a Caucasian man between the ages of 20 and 25 with dark hair, short and a light beard, wearing a plain white t-shirt and black shorts. He followed Kelsey into the Target store about 30 seconds and continued to follow her from a distance as she browsed the various sections. The surveillance cameras captured his movements, and his behavior was later described by the prosecution as similar to a predator stalking its prey. After Kelsey left the store, the man followed her to the Oak Park parking lot in his Chevrolet truck, waiting until she was alone. It's possible that he overheard her conversation with her mother, as he was standing close by while she was on the phone. This may have allowed him to learn about her plans to visit the nearby shopping center. Unfortunately, Kelsey had parked her car in a poorly lit spot, next to a side door and a storage area, which made it difficult for the cameras to capture what happened next. As Kelsey sat in her car, the man parked his truck beside her and got out, wearing the same white t-shirt and black shorts. The stranger came up to her on the driver's side and, likely threatening to harm her, forced her to get behind the wheel of his Chevrolet. The truck then drove away in an unknown direction. Due to Gregory Smith's connections and experience, he believed that the more attention and coverage the case received, the higher the chances of finding their daughter and bringing the perpetrator to justice. As a result, the story was featured in both national and international media, including the popular show America's Most Wanted. When surveillance footage showed the stranger following Kelsey, the clearest images of his face were broadcast on the news, urging viewers to come forward if they recognized him. The police received calls from people claiming to have seen the man in various cities and states, although most of these reports turned out to be incorrect. Each lead was investigated. On June 6, a woman named Mrs. Miggs called the police, stating that she recognized her neighbor, Edwin Hall, from the footage. Initially, she had hesitated to report it due to doubts, but the information about the truck removed her last doubts, as Edwin owned an old 1970s Chevrolet. On June 6, 2007, two significant events occurred in the investigation. The police received crucial data from Verizon Communications about the last known location of Kelsey's phone signal. This information pinpointed a specific cell tower, allowing the police to establish a 1.1-mile search radius to the north. Within 45 minutes of starting the search, Kelsey's body was found in the brush near Longview Lake, Missouri, about 30 meters from where she was abducted. The medical examiners determined that she had been brutally assaulted and strangled with her own belt. Kelsey's body was discovered without clothing, except for the belt used to strangle her. Her body was carelessly discarded in the bushes, partially covered with dry branches. Over the 4 days it lay exposed to the June sun, her remains were severely disfigured by insects and wildlife, making them almost unrecognizable. Despite the state of her remains, the examination confirmed that the body was indeed Kelsey Smith. The second major event on June 6 was the arrest of the main suspect. When police arrived at his residence, he remained calm and acknowledged that his friends called him Jack. He agreed to provide a statement at the police station. During the interrogation, Edwin Hall claimed he had never seen Kelsey before, even when shown a photograph of her. When presented with surveillance footage from the store that showed him following her, he insisted that he had only visited Target for personal reasons and hadn't noticed her. He suggested that their appearance together in the footage was just a strange coincidence. Despite being shown irrefutable evidence, Edwin seemed confident that he had covered his tracks and couldn't be held accountable. He had thoroughly cleaned his van and had used protection during the assault, leaving no DNA evidence behind. However, Edwin agreed to cooperate with the investigation and provided his DNA sample and fingerprints. A crucial piece of evidence emerged when his fingerprints matched those found on Kelsey's car's seatbelt buckle. A thorough search of his home also revealed a hidden air pistol with Kelsey's DNA on the barrel. Edwin was officially charged with abduction, assault, and murder. A jurisdictional issue arose, as Kelsey was abducted in Kansas but her body was found dead in Missouri. This was important because it affected the potential sentence. In Missouri, Edwin faced the possibility of a capital punishment trial and sentence. Edwin realized the seriousness of his situation and, after consulting his lawyer, decided to confess to the crime and provide details in the hope of a reduced sentence. He described how he had noticed Kelsey entering the store and followed her, getting close enough to overhear her phone conversation about visiting the shopping center across the street. Edwin waited until Kelsey was alone, then followed her to the adjacent parking lot. He was pleased when she parked in a secluded spot near the side entrance. He got out of his vehicle, armed with a pistol, and waited for Kelsey to return to her car. As she was getting into the driver's seat, he prevented her from closing the door. Kelsey had already pulled out the seatbelt, and Edwin allowed her to buckle up, leaving his fingerprint on it. Edwin then put the pistol barrel in Kelsey's mouth, threatening her to move to his vehicle's driver's seat. Kelsey drove Edwin's truck while he aimed the gun at her and gave her directions. When they reached a remote area at the state border, Edwin ordered Kelsey out of the truck and led her into the bushes. There, he assaulted and strangled her with the belt, then covered her body with branches. He thoroughly cleaned his truck to eliminate any evidence of Kelsey's presence, including fingerprints and DNA. He then hid the pistol, which had Kelsey's saliva on it, in his home, believing it would never be discovered. When questioned about his motive, Edwin failed to provide a clear answer, instead making a comment about the victim's physical appearance. During the investigation, several other women and girls came forward, revealing a pattern of abuse and harassment by Edwin. Further investigation uncovered more instances of Edwin's wrongdoing, including coercing a 14-year-old neighbor into intimacy, harassing a waitress, and fleeing a restaurant without paying. These findings led to additional charges, including corruption of a minor, harassment, and theft. Edwin's lawyer attempted to garner sympathy from the court by highlighting his client's troubled childhood, past victimization, and unstable upbringing. Despite these efforts, the defense was unsuccessful. Edwin's lawyer was the only person to speak in his defense and show support. Notably, Edwin's wife attended all court hearings but chose not to defend her husband, instead sitting quietly in the background. On September 16, 2008, a Johnson County judge sentenced Edwin Hall to 27 life sentences without parole. After hearing the verdict, the defendant apologized to the Kelsey family for his actions and broke down in tears. He is now serving his sentence at the Hutchinson Correctional Facility in Kansas. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Sarah Stern. Sarah Elizabeth Sarah was born on March 24, 1997, in Neptune City, New Jersey, to Michael and Susan Sarah. As their only child, Sarah received all the love and attention from her parents, who had been unable to have more children due to health issues. Sarah grew up to be a lively, cheerful, and outgoing child. She was involved in various activities, including school theater, photography, drawing, swimming, and softball. Her passion was art, and she aspired to become an artist or designer. After graduating from high school, Sarah enrolled in a local college to pursue her dream. Tragedy struck in the autumn of 2013 when Sarah's mother, Susan, passed away after a long battle with cancer. Despite periods of remission, the disease ultimately took its toll. This devastating loss was a tremendous shock to the family, particularly for Sarah, who was extremely close to her mother. After a period of struggling with depression, Sarah began to support her ailing father and care for their beloved dog, Buddy. As time passed, her life started to improve, and she set goals for the future. Upon graduating from college, Sarah planned to apply to a prestigious university in New York. Before pursuing further education, she hoped to travel the world, with a particular interest in visiting Canada and possibly even living there for a while. Her father, Michael Sarah, frequently traveled out of state for work, often for weeks at a time. However, he never worried about leaving Sarah alone, as she was a grown and independent young woman, and their town was considered safe. But on the night of December 3, 2016, around 2:30 a.m., an unsettling incident occurred. A concerned citizen reported an abandoned vehicle on the Belmar Bridge along Highway 35, prompting the police to become involved. The area was usually deserted at night, which made the lone, empty vehicle stand out. A taxi driver, who was taking a shortcut home across the old bridge on the outskirts, noticed the car parked on the side of the road. He stopped to see if anyone needed assistance, but found the vehicle empty with no one around. Concerned that the driver might have jumped into the water below, a tragic occurrence that had happened before in this spot, the taxi driver called the police. Police officers responding to the scene found the car's keys in the ignition and no signs of blood or struggle, leading them to initially believe that the owner may have intentionally left the car on the bridge to jump into the river. To investigate further, they checked the car's ownership and discovered it belonged to 85-year-old Lily Sarah, who lived in a nearby town. When officers visited Lily's home, they found her alive and well. She explained that she hadn't driven the car in years due to poor eyesight, and her 19-year-old granddaughter, Sarah, was the frequent driver. Lily tried to contact Sarah but was unable to reach her because her phone was turned off. She then provided the officers with her son's address, where Sarah lived, and informed them that Sarah was likely alone, as her father was out of town for work and wouldn't return until the following week. Sarah was nowhere to be found at her home. Although the back door was open, an initial search of the house didn't turn up any signs of foul play. However, they did find the family dog locked in one of the bedrooms, whining. Despite the open back door, there were no signs of disarray or struggle, and no evidence of an intruder. As the news of her disappearance spread, Sarah's father, Michael, rushed back home on the next available flight. Upon his arrival, he confirmed that everything was still in its place and nothing was missing. Notably, all of Sarah's personal belongings, including her passport, driver's license, and mobile phone, were still at the house. The police shared their initial concerns with Michael, suggesting that Sarah might have gone to the nearby bridge with intentions to harm herself. They asked if he had noticed any warning signs of suicidal tendencies or self-harm. Michael revealed that Sarah had struggled with depression after her mother's passing, but had made a full recovery with the help of loved ones and her studies. In fact, Sarah had big plans for her future, aspiring to become a designer and travel the world. To piece together what happened, the police needed to know who Sarah had contact with on the day she vanished, what conversations she had, and who saw her last. The first witnesses to come forward revealed that Sarah had spent most of December 2nd with her childhood friend, Liam McAtasney. As the last person to see her, Liam was a crucial part of the investigation. The police quickly decided to speak with him to gather more information and reconstruct the events of that day. When the police arrived at the McAtasney residence, they met with Liam's mother, who told them that her son was sleeping after a night shift. The officers asked her to wake Liam, who seemed confused about the situation. Once he was informed about Sarah's disappearance, Liam confirmed that they had spent the previous day together and agreed to go to the police station to give a statement. Liam shared that he and Sarah had attended college classes together that morning, but they decided to skip the last 2 lectures and go to her place to unwind instead. At her house, they played video games, chatted about their plans, and socialized. They briefly left her house twice to pick up food and visit a local supermarket. Liam left Sarah's house around 7 p.m. to go to his night shift job and did not see her again. Liam was also asked if Sarah had been struggling with any mental health issues. He explained that she had been battling deep depression since her mother passed away. He shared that Sarah often felt hopeless, wanting to escape or end her life, but he did not think that this meant she was planning to harm herself. He noted that she also struggled to connect with her father, leading to additional emotional strain. Liam considered it possible that Sarah's emotional state may have contributed to her disappearance. However, it was also clear that Sarah was planning a trip to Canada around that time and had recently exchanged money in preparation for her travels. Liam's testimony gained credibility when Canadian dollars were found in her bedside table drawer, though the amount was relatively insignificant. Preston Taylor, a close friend from high school, corroborated Liam's story. Preston mentioned that Sarah had struggled with depression, leading him to wonder if she had fled to Canada or taken her own life by jumping off a bridge. His emotional testimony underscored the strong bond he shared with Sarah. Despite these accounts, investigators soon ruled out the possibility of Sarah fleeing the country due to the absence of her passport. As a result, the search focused on the more distressing possibility of her having jumped to her death. A comprehensive search operation was launched along the river, involving divers, specialized equipment, and hundreds of volunteers, including police. However, strong currents posed a challenge, potentially carrying her remains or personal belongings far from the bridge, and thorough searches of both riverbanks were necessary to try to find any signs of Sarah. Among the volunteers searching for Sarah were her friends Liam and Preston. Despite their efforts, the search yielded nothing, prompting law enforcement to re-question those closest to Sarah. It was during this process that discrepancies in their accounts began to emerge. Sarah's friends and classmates described her as a happy and carefree person, with no signs of depression or problems with her father, whom she often spoke about affectionately. However, Liam and Preston's behavior after Sarah's disappearance raised eyebrows. They initially acted as if they had lost a loved one, gaining sympathy from many. But over time, their behavior seemed increasingly insincere, as if they were performing for an audience. The fact that Liam and Preston had only recently become close, about a month before Sarah's disappearance, raised suspicions and led the police to re-question them. Liam was visibly shaken when he was brought in for further questioning. The investigator asked him about his relationship with Sarah and Preston, and Liam explained that the three of them had grown up together on the same street and attended the same school. They were extremely close, sharing their deepest secrets and dreams with each other. Preston had even taken Sarah to prom, but they had never been romantically involved. Liam clarified that his relationship with Sarah was more than just friendship; he considered her like a sister. They had even listed each other as siblings on social media. Sarah had confided in Liam about her family, telling him that her mother had left her a significant amount of money in a safety deposit box at the bank. Sarah didn't trust her father, who claimed a right to the money, so she planned to retrieve it soon and move to Canada. However, when the investigator shared this information with Michael, Sarah's father, he provided a conflicting account. According to Michael, his wife had been saving money for Sarah's future since her birth, setting aside funds for education, a wedding, or a down payment on a house. The money had been stored at home in a shoe box, containing old and worn-out bills, but no one had thought much of it at the time. After Sarah's mother passed away, her father gave her a large sum of money, which he advised her to put in the bank. Sarah took his advice, dividing the money between her checking account for everyday expenses and a safe deposit box for the rest. She intended to use the money for graduate school and travel. Michael claimed he wasn't interested in the money for himself. When investigators discovered that Sarah had access to a significant amount of money, they began to suspect that her disappearance might be related to her finances. They decided to look into her financial transactions, including her bank account and safe deposit box. Their investigation revealed that Sarah had withdrawn a large amount of cash from an ATM just a few days before she disappeared, and had also accessed her safe deposit box at the bank around the same time. The detectives were in for another surprise when they reviewed the bank's surveillance footage, which showed that Sarah was not alone when she visited the bank on December 1st. Liam was with her, raising questions about why he hadn't mentioned this earlier. When asked about it, Liam explained that Sarah had confided in him about her banking activities and had asked for his accompaniment because she was nervous about carrying a large sum of cash. Liam's hesitation was evident, but his story seemed plausible, and his demeanor appeared genuine. Further investigation led to the discovery of a security camera in a neighboring house that had captured footage of the street and Sarah's yard. The footage confirmed that Liam had stayed at Sarah's house until 7 p.m., then left for work and didn't return. Meanwhile, the silver sedan was seen leaving the garage around 11 p.m. This new information added a chilling twist to the already disturbing case. In a surprising turn of events, an acquaintance of Sarah's named Anthony walked into the police station about a month after her disappearance. Unaware of the recent events, Anthony had been out of town for several weeks. He shared a peculiar story that sent shockwaves through the investigation. It turned out that Anthony had gone to school with Sarah, Liam, and Preston, and after graduation, he had pursued a passion for filmmaking, keeping in touch only with Liam, who also shared his interest in cinema. Anthony remembered that about a month and a half before Sarah disappeared, Liam visited him and they spent an evening brainstorming ideas for a horror movie aimed at teenagers. Liam came up with a plot about a girl who shares a secret about a large sum of money with her friend, who then gains her trust and kills her, dumping her body in a river. Anthony thought the idea was good, and they even wrote a few pages of the script. After that, Anthony moved on to another project and forgot about the story. He then left town to work on a film as a camera assistant. When he returned, Liam unexpectedly called him and asked if the police had contacted Anthony. Anthony was surprised and had not heard that Sarah was missing, so he decided to go to the police. After hearing a new witness's testimony, the police asked Anthony to try to get Liam to confess by drawing him into a conversation. Anthony agreed and a plan was set in motion. He would invite Liam to work on a project that required renting expensive camera equipment, which they would pretend they couldn't afford. Liam had ambitions of being in a movie, so the police thought he would likely jump at the chance to make his dream a reality, especially if it meant using the money he had taken from Sarah. They decided to test him by setting up a sting operation. Anthony, a friend of Liam's, was asked to pretend to have connections in the film industry and offer him a deal. Anthony met with Liam and suggested they discuss the details in person. Unbeknownst to Liam, a hidden camera had been installed in Anthony's car to capture any incriminating evidence. When Liam got into the car, he looked around nervously, as if he suspected something was off. He then handed Anthony an envelope containing $2,000 in cash and asked if it was enough to rent the equipment they would need for the movie. Anthony agreed, and then asked Liam where he had gotten the old bills. Liam hesitated before admitting that the money belonged to Sarah, and that he and his friend Preston had taken it from her house because, in his words, the dead don't need it. Although Liam didn't provide any further details, his admission was enough for the police to arrest him and his friend Preston on suspicion of a crime. Preston, Liam's accomplice, quickly began cooperating with the authorities and struck a deal with the prosecution. He told them that he hadn't directly participated in the crime, but had helped Liam cover his tracks and get rid of Sarah's body. According to Preston, Liam started plotting to take Sarah's money as soon as he found out about it. Sarah had kept her inheritance a secret, even from her closest friend, for a long time. However, when she began making serious plans for a trip to Canada, Liam asked her how she intended to pay for it, and she revealed that she had inherited a sum of money from her mother. Liam then persuaded her that it would be safer to store the money in a home safe rather than a bank vault, and he urged her to withdraw the cash. Liam, determined to carry out his plan, waited for the perfect opportunity while Sarah's father was away on a business trip. He enlisted the help of his friend Preston, promising him $25,000 in exchange for his assistance. Liam had Sarah withdraw a large sum of money from the ATM, but didn't check the exact amount. They spent the next day together, waiting for the right moment to strike. When the time came, Liam separated Sarah from her dog by locking it in another room, then approached Sarah from behind and attempted to strangle her. However, the crime proved more difficult than Liam anticipated. Sarah, being physically strong and athletic, resisted fiercely, resulting in an intense struggle until she eventually lost consciousness. But despite his best efforts, Liam was unable to determine whether she had truly succumbed. Sarah continued to show signs of life, leaving Liam to prolong his efforts to ensure her demise. This took nearly 30 minutes. Only when Liam was certain Sarah was dead did he leave her house, going about his normal routine by heading to work. He then had Preston follow up on his original instructions, no doubt aiming to ensure their sinister act would go unnoticed. Liam McAtasney snuck into Sarah's house through the back door, avoiding the camera's view, and dragged the body to the garage. He then cleaned up the room to remove any evidence. A couple of hours later, he returned to the house, took a small safe from Sarah's room, and placed the body in the car. Liam drove away carefully to avoid being caught on the neighbor's camera. He met Preston at a bridge, where they transferred the body to Preston's car and then disposed of it in a nearby river. After disposing of the body, they cleaned the car and drove back to Liam's house to divide the stolen money. However, they were disappointed to find only $110,000 in the safe. They decided to be cautious and not spend the old bills immediately to avoid raising suspicion. Preston buried the safe in a local park, and they only spent the money Sarah had withdrawn from her account. During the trial, Preston confessed to the crime, but Liam denied any involvement and tried to shift the blame to his friend. Liam's lawyer also claimed his client was innocent, suggesting that Preston acted alone. The case was complicated by the fact that Sarah's body was never found. When police searched Liam's house, they found a small key that fit the buried safe, which was identified by Preston as evidence of Liam's guilt. The trial of Liam McAtasney lasted over 2 years. Despite the fact that Sarah Stern's body was never found, the evidence presented in court proved McAtasney's guilt. This evidence included a script he had written months before the crime, a key to a safe found in his home, incriminating statements he made in the car, and old bills he had given to someone. Furthermore, fingerprints belonging to Liam and his accomplice, Preston Taylor, were found inside the safe. A co-worker of Liam's also testified that he had been absent from work for a few hours on the night of the crime and had asked someone to cover for him. As a result of the trial, Liam was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Preston, who had not directly participated in the crime, received an 18-year sentence for obstructing justice and hindering the investigation. Preston will be eligible for parole in 15 years. Unfortunately, Sarah Stern's body has still not been found. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Vicki Roberts. Vicki Roberts was born in September 1984 in northwest England, where she was raised in a traditional and devoutly religious family. She was the younger of 2 daughters and was raised with strong Christian values. She attended a Christian school, where she also developed her musical talents and sang in the choir. Those who knew Vicki described her as a kind, friendly, and helpful person who was always willing to lend a hand. After completing high school, Vicki enrolled in university and took a part-time job at an IKEA store to support herself. It was there that she met Michael Roberts, and their initial friendship eventually blossomed into a romantic relationship. Michael was only a year older than her. Like Vicki, Michael balanced his studies with a part-time job at IKEA and made time for sports. He was also careful about his appearance and made a good impression on those around him. Vicki was initially put off by Michael's bold and outgoing personality, but she soon found herself developing strong romantic feelings for him. Michael was born in June 1983 in Warrington, Cheshire, to a family of modest means. His father was a successful chemical engineer who expected a lot from his 2 sons, particularly Michael, the eldest. As a result, Michael grew up with high ambitions and a strong sense of purpose. He was a diligent student and developed into a driven and accomplished individual. Michael was a social butterfly with many friends and was often the life of the party. However, he took the most pride on the love front. With his good looks, sense of humor, and charming personality, Michael was a catch. He was also intelligent and well-read, able to hold his own in conversations on a wide range of topics. Michael's parents had instilled in him the idea that he was exceptional, praising his intelligence, beauty, and potential for success. However, this upbringing may have also fostered narcissistic tendencies. Despite this, Michael felt a deep-seated need to live up to his parents' expectations and be the perfect son, driving him to strive for their approval. Michael had a series of brief relationships and frequently dated multiple people simultaneously. He was confident in his charm and enjoyed the thrill of pursuing women who seemed out of his reach. For Michael, this was a game, a challenge to be won. Vicky is one of the challenges he wants to conquer. She was a modest and unattainable woman who initially kept Michael at arm's length, refusing even casual invitations. Vicky was focused on her studies and spent her free time at church, leaving little room for dating or relationships. Michael, however, was determined to win her over. It took Michael a few months to win Vicky over, but eventually she agreed to go out with him. He had charmed her with his sweet gestures, flowers, gifts, and thoughtful surprises. He even invited her to meet his parents, who immediately took a liking to her and approved of their son's choice. Vicky was convinced that Michael was genuinely interested in her, so she gave in to his advances. He became her first serious partner, and she felt truly happy when she was with him. It seemed like fate had brought them together. Michael also appeared to be in love and ready to settle down, but their happiness was short-lived. From the outside, their relationship seemed perfect. They were both young, attractive, and full of energy and ambition, with big plans for the future. Vicky soon discovered that Michael had a strong and adventurous approach to sex, with a high sex drive and a desire to try new things in the bedroom. At first, Michael didn't pressure Vicky to engage in certain activities, fearing she would leave him. However, once he felt secure in their relationship, he revealed his true desires. Vicky, a modest and religious person, was shocked but deeply in love with Michael and trusted him, keeping their private life a secret. Things took a turn when Michael proposed to Vicky, and she happily accepted, believing that marriage would bring an end to his experimental behavior. However, her closest friend began to notice Vicky covering up bruises and marks under her clothes. When confronted by her friend, Vicky initially denied any wrongdoing by Michael but eventually confessed that the marks were a result of Michael's affinity for bondage, toys, and other devices during their intimate moments. Vicky confided in her friend that she and Michael had intimate relations up to 5 times a week. Michael considered himself a skilled lover, viewing intimacy as an art form and a means of self-expression. Although he would occasionally compromise when Vicky refused to participate in his more extreme and reckless experiments, he usually managed to persuade her to give in to his desires. After graduating, Vicky became pregnant unexpectedly and decided to change careers. She soon landed a job as an account manager at a logistics company. Michael also left his job at IKEA and became a sales consultant at a large electronics retailer, selling phones, laptops, and other gadgets. Thanks to his charisma and persuasive abilities, he consistently exceeded his sales targets and quickly became one of the top-performing employees. Michael's success led to a promotion to senior sales, and he was being considered for a transfer to the company's main office. However, he needed to undergo additional training to improve his qualifications first. Michael enjoyed the training sessions and business trips to London, and he took great pride in his accomplishments. As a result, he often forgot about Vicky, his young fiancée, and only remembered her when he wanted intimacy. Vicky and Michael's relationship was lacking in several ways. They rarely spoke about each other or spent time together outside of the bedroom, making Vicky feel invisible to him. Meanwhile, Michael was secretly having affairs with co-workers, clients, and casual acquaintances. During this time, Vicky discovered she was pregnant and shared the news with Michael, expecting him to be thrilled and expedite their wedding plans. Instead, he was furious and insisted that she terminate the pregnancy, citing their youth and the fact that they had their whole lives ahead of them. Vicky was shocked and refused to consider abortion. Michael then attempted to persuade Vicky by appealing to her concerns about her family. He claimed that her parents, who were deeply religious, would be angry and disappointed in her for becoming pregnant out of wedlock. However, Michael promised that if Vicky agreed to have an abortion, they could keep and plan to have children after they were married. Vicky was faced with a tough decision, but Michael's persistence eventually won her over, and she went to the hospital. Unfortunately, the experience was complicated, and Vicky had to stay in the hospital for a few days. It took her nearly 3 weeks to recover. During this time, her doctor strictly advised her against intimate relationships. When Michael found out, he became furious. It was then that Vicky realized Michael had mental health issues and an addiction to sex. Without intimacy, he became unbearable, frequently leaving the house, citing urgent work matters. Vicky suspects Michael is having an affair, and she hoped that getting married would help him change his ways and be more committed to their relationship. As it turned out, their relationship was loveless, and Michael was leading a double life. Their 2-year engagement was just a convenient arrangement for him, as he had a loyal partner waiting for him at home, taking care of the household, while he maintained a string of mistresses on the side, which he frequently replaced. Vicky always trusted Michael and forgave him whenever he cheated, as long as he promised it wouldn't happen again. However, as time passed, Vicky began to pressure Michael into getting married, as she wanted to start a family and have children. Her parents also brought up the topic frequently, but what really pushed Michael to consider marriage was the insistence of his own parents, whom he didn't want to disappoint. Michael's parents adored Vicky, thinking she was perfect for their son. They constantly asked him they would tie the knot and give them grandchildren. With the help of his parents, Michael and Vicky organized a grand wedding, complete with a white dress, limousine, and a beautiful ceremony. The newlyweds appeared to be in love and happy, with a long life ahead of them. After the wedding, they settled into a large, cozy house in a prestigious area of Warrington, close to Michael's parents. Despite their marriage, Michael didn't truly love Vicky. It was more of a way to appear normal to others. Vicky never expressed her concerns about Michael's unusual behavior and frequent infidelity, allowing him to freely change partners. Meanwhile, Michael's career was thriving. He received a promotion and a significant salary increase after being transferred to a new office. His direct supervisor was Carrie Hall, the head of administration at Phones for You. Carrie was a decade older than Michael, divorced, and raising her son independently. Despite her tough exterior, she was attractive, well put together, and strong-willed, as her position demanded. For a while, she ignored Michael's subtle advances, but to him, her indifference was a signal to take action. Michael set out to win over Carrie, using his natural charm and eloquence to capture her attention. After about a month, Carrie reciprocated his interest, and they began a regular affair, meeting in hotel rooms. Their relationship was intense and passionate, with a focus on experimentation and exploration. Carrie, a confident and mature woman, was flattered by the attention of the younger Michael. She was aware that Michael was unlikely to end his marriage for her. Michael, on the other hand, was eager to explore his desires with Carrie, which he felt he couldn't express with his wife. He would often lie to his wife about working late or attending corporate events, while confiding in Carrie about his unhappy marriage and his desire to divorce. However, he never made any concrete moves to end his marriage. The affair lasted for over a year, with Carrie seemingly content with the arrangement. She made no demands for Michael to leave his wife and was satisfied with their clandestine meetings and the excitement they brought. Carrie's behavior changed as she started dressing more conservatively, covering her body with long sleeves and high-necked clothing, a departure from her usual style that highlighted her athletic build. Carrie confided in her close friend about her lover Michael's extreme intimate experiments, which often crossed a line. She showed her friend the evidence, a bite mark on her chest and bruises on her neck from his intense grip. There were also marks on her wrists from the ropes he used to tie her up, giving him complete control. The friend was alarmed and urged Carrie to report the incidents to the police, but Carrie refused, explaining that the acts were consensual and Michael usually warned her about what he was going to do. However, the intensity of the experiences often got out of hand. For instance, Michael enjoyed choking his partner, claiming it would enhance the experience, but there were times when Carrie lost consciousness due to his excessive enthusiasm. Carrie's friend was fearful of Michael's strangulation games, but Carrie consistently gave in to his persuasion, believing that he would eventually stop or that she would become desensitized to the experience. Sadly, neither Carrie nor any of Michael's mistresses made any attempt to stop his cruel and painful experiments. Vicky had suspicions about her Michael's infidelity even before they got married. She believed that her love and care could change him and make him a devoted family man. However, after the wedding, his cheating continued and even worsened. When Michael denied his infidelity, Vicky decided to investigate on her own. One night, while Michael was asleep, Vicky checked his phone and found numerous intimate conversations with other women, including Carrie. She was shocked to discover that Michael had exchanged explicit photos with some of these women. The discovery was devastating for Vicky, and she packed her bags and temporarily moved in with a friend. Vicky kept her situation a secret from her family, fearing their reaction. She was afraid that her religious relatives would pressure her to get a divorce if they found out about Michael's adultery. Despite her heartbreak, Vicky still loved Michael and didn't want to give up on their marriage. Before leaving, she wrote him a heartfelt letter, confessing her love and telling him that he was the most important person in her life. Michael's wife had finally had enough of his promiscuous and decided to leave him. Before she went, she wrote him a handwritten note explaining that she knew about his cheating and couldn't take it anymore. She left the note on the refrigerator and gave him time to think about his actions, but made it clear that she wouldn't file for divorce just yet. Despite his wife's departure, Michael didn't seem to be particularly upset or remorseful. However, he did realize that he would miss having a quiet and submissive partner who took care of the household and tolerated his behavior. He decided to try to win her back and followed her to her friend's house, bringing a large bouquet of flowers. He apologized and begged her to return, promising to be faithful from then on. His wife, Vicky, wanted to believe him and decided to give him another chance. For a while, Michael made an effort to be more considerate and even came home for dinner. He deleted his correspondence with his mistress, Carrie, and changed his social media password to avoid suspicion. However, Michael's good behavior didn't last long. He soon started pursuing a new female employee, Karen Wilson, who was engaged to be married. Despite her initial reluctance, Michael persisted in his pursuit of her, and they began an affair. Meanwhile, he continued to see Carrie on the side, juggling multiple relationships at once. He became infatuated with a new woman and ended his relationship with 33-year-old Carrie Hall after 2 months, as he had grown tired of her. He told Karen a fabricated story about being unhappy in his marriage and claimed he was willing to leave his wife for her. Karen believed him, and they had an intimate encounter in the office. A week later, she ended her engagement, expecting Michael to follow through on his promise. Michael had no intention of divorcing his wife, Vicky, but he wanted to keep his new mistress. To keep her happy, he lied to her, telling her that he had already filed for divorce and was living with his parents. However, Vicky soon became suspicious that Michael was still cheating on her. She decided to take action and gathered evidence of his adultery. While Michael was in the shower, Vicky took his phone but found nothing incriminating because he had deleted all his text messages and changed his social media password. Undeterred, she waited until he fell asleep and then took his work laptop, where she found his social media account still logged in. There, she discovered messages between Michael and his new girlfriend, in which he professed his love and claimed to be divorcing Vicky and living with his parents. Vicky was shocked and took screenshots of the messages as proof of Michael's infidelity. She also found receipts for hotel rooms in his wallet. The next morning, she confronted Michael, presenting him with the evidence adultery. For the first time in their relationship, she lost her temper. Michael was taken aback and tried to apologize, promising it would never happen again. However, Vicky threatened to tell his parents about his infidelity, hoping they could talk some sense into him since she couldn't. Michael was enraged by his wife Vicky's threat to tell his parents about their problems. In a fit of anger, he slapped her. Vicky then got up and said she would go to his parents immediately, heading for the door. Michael caught up to her, grabbed a heavy jewelry box from the dresser, and hit her in the head twice, knocking her unconscious. He then strangled her with his bare hands until she stopped breathing. Feeling no remorse, Michael wrapped Vicky's body in a blanket, placed it in large garbage bags, and carried it to the garage. He quickly cleaned the house, packed up most of Vicky's belongings, and removed them. He then invited his lover, Karen, over, and they had dinner, had fun, and made love in the same bedroom where the murder had taken place. The next day, Michael ran off with Karen. He told his parents that Vicky had left him for another man, even showing them fake messages from Vicky's phone, which he had sent himself. He went to his parents' home, sobbing on his mother's shoulder, pretending to be distraught over his wife's supposed infidelity. Michael sent his parents-in-law messages saying that their daughter had left him for another man. He also told them to give her space and not to bother her. The messages claimed that Vicky had fallen out of love with Michael and had moved in with someone else. Her parents were shocked and tried to contact Vicky to hear her side of the story, but she refused to answer their calls, only responding with messages asking for time. Vicky's parents found Michael's story suspicious and went to his house to confront him. However, his explanation only raised more questions. They soon discovered that Vicky had not shown up for work, which further alarmed them. They decided to report their concerns to the police, leading to an investigation. On December 1, 2009, Michael bought a shovel, rope, rags, and cleaning supplies from a hardware store. However, the police arrived at his house on the same day. He had been caught before he could dispose of a body. The police initially found nothing out of the ordinary, but Michael's actions and alibi sparked suspicion and raised several questions. Notably, they overlooked a large package in the garage during their search. Inside the house, they found no signs of her presence, such as clothes, documents, or personal items, which could suggest she had left of her own accord. However, Vicky's laptop was discovered in the bedroom, and upon seizing it, the police found screenshots of Michael's incriminating conversations with his mistresses, which Vicky had saved. The investigation took a significant turn when authorities made a geolocation request to Vicky's cell phone, which had been regularly sending messages to her husband and relatives. To everyone's surprise, the phone was found to be located in the marital home of Vicky and Michael. This led to a second, more thorough search of the Roberts residence. During this search, a suspicious package was discovered in the garage, and its contents shocked all who were present. However, in a stunning twist, Michael, who had been cooperating with the police, suddenly vanished into thin air. He had taken a wallet containing cash, which allowed him to evade capture for several days. After his money ran out, Michael turned to one of his mistresses, Lavinia T., and asked if he could stay with her for a while. However, when Lavinia heard on the news that Michael was wanted for his wife's murder, she immediately contacted the police and reported his whereabouts. Eventually, he was arrested, put on trial, and convicted. When the authorities arrived to arrest Michael, he claiming he was innocent of the crime. A man claimed that his wife died accidentally during a consensual sex game where she asked him to strangle her with a rope belt, but he lost control. However, forensic experts disputed this claim, finding that she was actually strangled with bare hands, attacked from behind, and had 2 severe head injuries that occurred before her death, which were unrelated to the alleged sex game. The trial began in January 2010, with the defendant, Michael Roberts, maintaining that his wife's death was an accident and hoping for a lenient sentence. However, the autopsy results revealed a different story. Roberts had intentionally hit his wife on the head twice, then strangled her, and hidden her body in the garage. As a result, Roberts was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Carmen Thomas. Carmen Thomas was born on October 30th, 1987, in South Africa. Her life took a drastic turn when her father passed away when she was just 10 years old. Overwhelmed by grief, her family moved to live with relatives in Whitby, United Kingdom. However, the move did not bring the peace they had hoped for, and they eventually returned to South Africa. When Carmen turned 18, she decided to leave behind with her relatives and later relocated to London to pursue her education. She earned a master's degree in marketing and quickly became known for her charismatic and outgoing personality. Carmen formed strong bonds with many people and became a loyal friend and companion. However, living in a big city like London came with its expenses, and Carmen had to work hard to maintain a decent standard of living. By day, she worked as a marketer in a store, and by night, she worked part-time at a gentleman's club. Although her career choices may have raised eyebrows, Carmen was a woman of principle and never compromised her values. She conducted herself with dignity and earned the respect of her clients. It was during her time at the club that she met Brad Callahan, a charming and flamboyant man. Brad was born in April 1978 in New Zealand to parents who separated when he was just 9 years old. He stayed with his mother and later moved to Australia. Brad graduated from university in 2001 with a degree in construction engineering. He was then offered a job as a chief structural engineer for a large business complex in the UK by a prominent construction company. To navigate the complex's high-stakes negotiations and enhance his professional status, Brad sought the services of a gentleman's agency, where he met Carmen. She was intelligent, tall, and beautiful, with striking dark eyes and black hair. However, Brad's demanding career and ambitious nature left him little time for a serious relationship. Despite this, Brad and Carmen got along well after a dinner, and their casual interactions eventually blossomed into a solid friendship. Over time, their friendship deepened into a romance, and they began living together. Their relationship was built on mutual trust, care, and support. When Carmen got pregnant, Brad decided it would be better to go back to New Zealand, a country with cleaner air and a more laid-back lifestyle. In March 2005, they returned to Auckland. After the birth of their son Jack, they experienced immense happiness. They prioritized Jack's safety and well-being, making sure he had everything he needed for a happy childhood. However, the arrival of their son brought significant challenges to their relationship. The first problems arose in the relationship between Carmen and Brad due to disagreements on how to raise their child, causing tension and instability. After 3 years, they decided to go their separate ways, but shared joint custody of their son, Jack. The breakup was challenging for both, but they made a genuine effort to maintain a positive relationship for Jack's sake. Carmen and Jack eventually moved in with Colin, Carmen's half-brother, who also lived in Auckland. With time, Carmen regained her emotional balance and started a new life without Brad. In 2008, she and her son relocated to a house on a street near Brad's, so Jack could be close to his father. Having lost her own father at a young age, Carmen wanted to ensure Jack always had a father figure in his life. Despite her decision to live near Brad, Carmen's friends and family believed she and Brad still had a good friendship, but in reality, they only spent time together when it was related to Jack. As time passed, life continued for Carmen. After parting ways, Carmen and Brad each attempted to move on. Brad resumed his career as a construction engineer and, in May 2009, began a new relationship, which ultimately led to an engagement. Meanwhile, Carmen devoted herself to raising their son and, much to Brad's dismay, returned to her work at a gentleman's club. This choice troubled Brad. Carmen repeatedly presented Brad with ultimatums, but he dismissed her requests, focusing on his impending marriage and plans for fatherhood once again. This marked the beginning of adjustments to his financial commitments, specifically affecting the alimony payments for the maintenance of their son, Jack, which Brad made in accordance with their agreement. However, Carmen viewed the financial constraints as a catalyst in an escalating series of conflicts. Tensions escalated until March 19, 2010, when a domestic violence incident occurred. Police responded to a neighbor's call about a dispute and mediated the situation. As a result, Carmen received a formal warning from law enforcement. On June 29, 2010, Brad visited Carmen's house to discuss a new school for Jack and to sign a written agreement for child support. However, Carmen was unhappy with the document and asked Brad to leave, yelling that Jack was not his son as he departed. 2 weeks later, Brad tried to contact Carmen again, but she did not respond. On July 13, 2010, Brad reported Carmen missing to the police, who began searching for her. Through video footage and interviews with neighbors, investigators were able to reconstruct a timeline of events leading up to Carmen's disappearance. They discovered that on June 29, a surveillance camera at a nearby supermarket had captured footage of Carmen, providing a potential lead in the search. During their investigation of the rented house where Carmen and Jack lived, police noticed that there was no outdoor garbage can. Inside the house, they found bloodstains on the front door, washing machine, sink, and shower. To confirm the presence of blood, forensic scientists used luminol, a substance that reacts with the iron in hemoglobin. The test revealed multiple patterns of blood on the bathroom door and floor. The landlord reported that on June 29, she heard loud screaming, followed by prolonged crying and moaning. When she knocked on Carmen's door, no one answered. She looked out the window and saw a street trash can and an overturned drying rack, which caught her attention. She called her husband, but before he arrived, Brad walked out of the house, carrying soiled clothes. He told the landlord that Carmen had become ill after a medical procedure and had vomited blood. However, the landlord noticed that Brad appeared to have just taken a shower. She had no reason to doubt his story, so she didn't call the police. The search for Carmen continued, and her cell phone activity caught the police's attention. Although messages were being sent from her phone regularly, the tone and language used were unusual and didn't match her previous communication style. The outgoing messages and calls continued until July 10th. During further investigation, Carmen's car was found, and in the back seat, they discovered her luggage, clothes, and other personal belongings. The police investigation into Carmen's disappearance began with the examination of her seized suitcase, which revealed traces of blood and a note indicating she owed money to her employer. An envelope with Misty's name and $270 was also found in the glove compartment. Inspector Mark Benefield suspected foul play after finding blood in the car and launched a search for Carmen's body in the countryside southeast of Auckland, but it was inconclusive. As the investigation continued, police analyzed Carmen's and Brad's phones, discovering they had been in close proximity to each other during the search. However, Carmen's phone was not connected to a cell tower in Hamilton. A crucial piece of evidence was a missing trash can, which had disappeared from its usual spot near the house on the day Carmen vanished. A neighbor reported seeing the can being taken away through her window. Police suspected the trash can might have been used to dispose of evidence. When EE examined Brad's phone records and bank card details, then they found that on June 30th, Brad had purchased a meat cleaver, a large plastic container, and several garbage bags, which raised suspicions. By studying Brad's daily routine, police identified some unusual events, including a day when he arrived early at the construction site and walked alone around the property for an extended period. While it was not unusual for a supervisor to be on site early, the police found it noteworthy. After gathering evidence, including Carmen's cell phone and suspicious purchases, they began to suspect Brad of murder. They believed Brad had killed his former lover, Carmen Thomas, by hitting her multiple times in the head and then carefully hiding her body. On September 21st, Brad was arrested and charged with Carmen's murder and attempting to obstruct justice. Brad's second son was born while he was in custody, causing him to become emotional and resentful. 9 days after his arrest, Brad broke down and revealed to investigators the location of Carmen's body. It turned out that Brad had attempted to create an alibi by making it seem like Carmen had left for Hamilton and never returned. However, under questioning, he eventually detailed the events of the day Carmen was killed, revealing that his plan had not been as perfect as he thought. Brad admitted that Carmen and Brad had a heated argument, which ended with Carmen telling Brad that Jack was not his son. In a fit of rage, Carmen kicked Brad out of the house. However, he returned 5 minutes later, grabbed a baseball bat, and brutally attacked Carmen, striking her in the head with such force that she fell unconscious, bleeding profusely. Despite realizing the gravity of his actions, Brad continued to assault Carmen, throwing several punches. Memories of happier times flashed before his eyes, but his anger and resentment consumed him. Brad knew his life would never be the same after this moment, and he could never undo the damage. Nevertheless, he felt a twisted sense of satisfaction, believing that he had solved his problem and ensured that Jack was now his alone. Brad regained his composure, took a shower, and quietly left Carmen's house. In the following days, he devised a plan to dispose of Carmen's body and cover up the crime. He met his friend outside a supermarket and asked him to buy black garbage bags, kerosene, and cleaning products, hoping to avoid raising suspicion. Brad then returned to the apartment, meticulously cleaned up the bloodstains, wrapped Carmen's body in a bag, and disposed of it in a trash can. After killing Carmen, Brad dismembered her body into 8 pieces to make it easier to dispose of. He cut off her legs at the hip joints and then cut each leg in half at the knee. He also severed her arms and head from her torso. A few days later, on July 3rd, Brad met a friend at a boat ramp in Oahu Bay, near downtown Oakland. He confessed to his friend that he had killed Carmen during an argument and asked for help disposing of her body. However, his friend refused to provide a boat to dump the remains into the sea. Over the next few days, Brad drove to Ware Ridge in West Auckland and buried the dismembered body parts in a shallow grave. On July 7th, he drove Carmen's car to Hamilton and abandoned it in a hotel parking lot. He left a suitcase of clothes and some of her personal belongings in the car to make it seem like she had left voluntarily. However, he made a critical mistake by including bloody clothes in the suitcase. In an attempt to cover his tracks, Brad started sending text messages from Carmen's cell phone to her friends, pretending to be her. He claimed that she was not feeling well and had been in bad shape for days. However, this plan ultimately backfired on him. On October 1st, police excavated the burial site indicated by Brad and found the body of Carmen Thomas. Her remains were discovered in plastic containers, carefully removed from a makeshift grave on Wayfair Ridge. An autopsy revealed that Carmen Thomas had died from multiple blows to the head, with the fatal blow causing a compressed skull fracture. After multiple forensic examinations, Carmen's body was released to her family on October 13. Tragically, her young son Jack, who had been waiting and hoping to see his mother again, was only able to hug and kiss her white casket. On February 8, 2011, Brad Callahan's first court hearing was held. Judge Winning determined that the crime was unintentional and took into account Brad's claim that he acted impulsively in a state of rage. However, the judge was more severe in his assessment of the subsequent cover-up. On May 26, 2011, Brad Callahan was charged with attempting to change the course of justice. A retrial was held on November 25, 2011, where police officers filled the High Court in Auckland. In a surprise move, Brad Callahan made 2 guilty pleas, admitting to murder and attempting to change the course of justice after Carmen's death. A judge has sentenced 31-year-old Brad Callahan to life in prison for murdering Carmen Thomas. Brad was also given a 6-year sentence for attempting to interfere with the investigation into Thomas's death. The judge considered this one of the most serious cases of attempted interference with justice, describing Brad's actions as extremely serious. During the trial at Auckland High Court, the judge criticized the brutality of Thomas's murder, but decided not to impose the harshest possible sentence. The courtroom was filled with Thomas's friends and family, including her parents who had traveled from South Africa. Judge Venin condemned Brad's attempts to cover up his crime, which involved considerable effort and deception. The 6-year sentence for interfering with the investigation will be served at the same time as the life sentence. In a statement, the Thomas family expressed their ongoing anger and grief, saying that no punishment can bring their daughter back. However, they are relieved that Brad will be in prison for a long time, giving him the opportunity to reflect on the harm he has caused. Little boy Jack Brad is living with his grandmother in another town under an assumed name. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Brianna Marie Schneller. Brianna Marie Schneller was an 18-year-old with a vibrant personality who loved Mexican food, music, dancing, and roller coasters. She was an exceptional student, and ranking as the top student at Everest High School in Washington, according to her parents, Craig and Lori Schneller. Brianna had a promising future ahead, with a trip to Tennessee planned for the summer and a notable achievement as the only student in Wisconsin to qualify for a national competition in professional and technical fields. Brianna's passion was to pursue a career in restaurant management and eventually start her own business in the food service industry. To gain experience and skills, she worked part-time at El Mezcal restaurant in Rib Mountain. Those who knew her, including friends, colleagues, and customers, described her as kind and responsive. Brianna's life was on the verge of 2 major events: her graduation and her wedding to her 22-year-old fiancé, Sebastian Ramirez. Brianna's parents initially disapproved of her relationship with Sebastian due to their age difference and concerns that she was growing up too quickly. However, after getting to know Sebastian better, they began to trust him and saw that he genuinely loved Brianna and had serious plans for their future together. They eventually moved in together, sharing an apartment on 12th Avenue in Wow with Sebastian's 19-year-old younger brother, Hugo. To outsiders, it seemed like the 3 of them got along well and lived harmoniously, burning the envy of many for their close friendship. Sebastian and Hugo supported Brianna's interests and also worked with her at a local restaurant called El Tequila Salsa. It's likely that this is where Sebastian and Brianna first met. Despite their seemingly perfect life, tragedy struck on May 2, 2009. The day began like any other, with Sebastian waking up early and trying not to disturb Brianna, who was still sleeping peacefully beside him. It was a day off from school, and she had no reason to wake up early. Brianna woke up while her boyfriend was in the shower. They exchanged affectionate greetings and discussed their plans for the day. Meanwhile, Sebastian tried to rouse Hugo, who had returned home early that morning after a late-night party. Hugo was clearly hungover. After Sebastian left for work, which was just a short walk away, his younger brother followed suit. Brianna was left alone in the apartment. Later, Hugo was feeling unwell. His hangover was severe, and he was struggling to concentrate. He decided to take an early lunch break and headed home to rest. When he arrived at the apartment, everything seemed normal at first. However, as he entered his brother's room, he noticed that it was in disarray. Brianna was lying on the floor, unresponsive. Hugo rushed to her side and asked what was wrong, but she didn't answer. At first, he didn't notice the blood. Hugo discovered a horrific scene when he removed a towel covering a woman's face. Her severe injuries had left Hugo almost unrecognizable, and he was utterly shocked and overcome with grief at the sight of her. Despite his distress, he knew he had to act quickly and ran to his neighbor's apartment on the floor below for help. The neighbor, a woman, called emergency services at 1:30 p.m., who was too distraught to speak clearly. The emergency operator received the call and was told that she was the girlfriend of Sebastian. She was lying on the floor, severely injured with cuts all over her body and a badly disfigured face. The operator was informed that she showed no signs of life. Police and paramedics rushed to the apartment building after receiving a call. When they arrived, they found a crowded parking lot, but one person stood out, Hugo Ramirez. He approached the officers and led them to the apartment where the incident occurred. Inside, they found a disturbing scene. Brianna's body was severely injured, with deep stab wounds on her chest, neck, and wrist. Hugo was visibly shaken and could barely speak as he led officers to the apartment. He simply pointed to Brianna's body, and the officers took note of the scene. The officers asked Hugo to leave the room so that forensic specialists could begin their examination. The specialists observed that the blood on the floor had already started to dry, suggesting that Brianna's body had been there for some time. It was clear that she had tried to defend herself, as evidenced by the defensive cuts on her arms. However, the attacker had overpowered her, leaving behind a crime scene with a significant amount of evidence. The forensic team found several key pieces of evidence, including a bloody iron on the floor, which appeared to have been used to strike Brianna's face. The iron was broken, with pieces scattered nearby. 2 knives were found in the bathroom sink, one of which was missing its sharp tip. Blood was also found on the soap, suggesting that the attacker had washed their hands after the crime. However, the most notable piece of evidence was a bloodied shoe print on the carpet, which drew the investigators' attention. The investigation of the house uncovered many new details. Notably, there were no signs of forced entry, suggesting that the victim may have known her attacker or that the perpetrator had a way to enter the apartment without breaking in. Additionally, a large sum of money was found scattered throughout the apartment, consisting of bills ranging from $1 to $20. According to Hugo, this money was comprised of tips they had accumulated at work, which were carelessly left lying around. At first glance, it appeared that nothing was missing from the apartment, indicating that the attack was not motivated by robbery. This theory was further supported by the discovery of a broken knife tip in the victim's body. The fact that the knife broke during the attack indicates that the perpetrator applied considerable force. It's crucial to grasp what may have motivated someone to hold such intense feelings of anger and aggression against she. Uncovering the cause of this brutal and unprecedented attack is crucial in shedding light on the matter. Craig and Laura Schneller anxiously waited at the police station, having heard that something terrible had happened at their daughter's home. Unfortunately, they had been unable to contact Brianna, and their hearts were heavy with worry. The officers had to tell the parents Brianna that their worst fears had come true. The news was devastating. Their daughter, Brianna, had passed away. The loss of a child is one of the greatest sorrows a parent can experience, and for the Schnellers, it was a life-altering moment. To confirm the identity, the authorities showed them photographs of Brianna, but only those that clearly showed her face, as some of the other images were too graphic. After confirming the tragic news, the Schnellers were in shock. With the help of a psychologist, they were able to compose themselves and answer questions from the police. They were eager to assist in the investigation and help catch the person responsible. The Schnellers provided as much information as they could about their daughter's life, but they insisted that she had no known enemies. They also revealed that Brianna's mother had been the last person she had spoken to that morning. Her mother, Craig, took Brianna's car to the repair shop and messaged her daughter around 10 a.m. to let her know. Brianna replied to the message. The investigation shows that the tragedy occurred at a point in time that was after they sent messages to each other and before Hugo's arrival. As part of their inquiry, detectives first interviewed the Ramirez brothers, Sebastian and Hugo, questioning them separately. Sebastian, Brianna's fiancé, stated that he woke up at 9:15 a.m., had a brief conversation with Brianna while getting ready for work, and then woke up his brother, Hugo. Around 10:15 a.m. Sebastian claimed he was already at the restaurant when he received a phone call informing him about the incident. Hugo's account corroborated Sebastian's, saying he left the house around 10:15 a.m., shortly after his brother. He returned home at 1:20 p.m. due to feeling unwell and wanting to rest. When Hugo found Brianna's body, his reported illness and fatigue vanished almost instantly. The events that followed were a daze. He was so shocked that he couldn't think clearly about how to respond. His mind went blank and his hands shook uncontrollably, prompting him to seek help from a neighbor. The Ramirez brothers' accounts were believable, and their distress seemed authentic. Nevertheless, the police had seen convincing performances before, so they needed concrete evidence to confirm their innocence. It was possible that one of the brothers was involved in the crime, and the other was covering for him. To investigate this, detectives asked about their relationships with each other. Sebastian expressed his love for Brianna and his excitement for their upcoming wedding. Hugo was questioned about whether he had any issues with Brianna or if they had argued, but he denied it. Hugo also explained that while he found her attractive and charming, he had no romantic intentions towards her because he valued his good relationship with his brother and would never jeopardize his happiness. Brianna was like a sister to Hugo. And after hours of questioning, neither Hugo nor Sebastian raised any suspicions. The police took DNA samples from the brothers and allowed them to return home. To verify the brothers' alibis, detectives spoke with employees of El Tequila Salsa restaurant and reviewed the restaurant's security footage. The brothers' accounts checked out, and the possibility of a domestic-related crime was ruled out. The investigation continued, and the question remained, who could have committed such a heinous crime against an innocent young woman? Was there a predator lurking in the city who had been watching Brianna and waiting for the perfect moment to strike? The police considered this possibility as they analyzed the evidence. The autopsy results confirmed the police's initial suspicions. The sequence of events was reconstructed as follows. Brianna was first hit on the head with a blunt object, likely an iron, which caused a severe injury. The perpetrator then cut her throat and inflicted multiple stab wounds to her body. The attack was extremely violent, with so many wounds that even experts couldn't count them all. At least 2 of the injuries were fatal. DNA from an unknown source was found under Brianna's fingernails, indicating that she struggled and resisted her attacker. Initial reports that nothing was missing from Brianna's home were later found to be incorrect. Brianna's phone had actually been taken, and Sebastian was the one who discovered its loss and informed the detectives. This new information became a crucial lead in the investigation. The police learned from the phone provider that the phone was still active and obtained its location. Surprisingly, the phone was found to be nearby, specifically on the premises of the restaurant where Sebastian and Hugo worked. This revelation added complexity to the case, given the brothers' solid alibi and the suspicious circumstances surrounding the missing phone. The detectives rushed to the location and found that the phone's coordinates led them to the parking lot of a shopping center that housed the restaurant. A search of the area revealed that the phone was likely in one of the trash bins. After a brief search, a plastic takeout bag with the logo of El Tequila Salsa was found in a container. Inside the bag were the victim's phone, 2 mismatched gloves, and a pair of women's underwear. One of the gloves had a bloodstain. The bag and its contents were sent to the lab for further analysis, which could potentially yield fingerprints or DNA from the perpetrator. After seeing a photo of the bag's contents, Sebastian identified his girlfriend's underwear. The police then questioned the restaurant staff multiple times. On May 5th, they asked everyone to provide a DNA sample and checked for any scratches or injuries. They also carefully reviewed all the surveillance footage, both inside and outside the building and nearby businesses. The police had a challenging task to figure out who had thrown away the bag. A kitchen worker initially caught the investigators' attention because he arrived late to work after Brianna had already been found lifeless. However, he had a solid alibi. He had been pulled over for speeding on his way to the restaurant. Reviewing the security footage was crucial to the investigation, which led them to another suspect, Raul Ponce Rocha, the 24-year-old kitchen manager. On the day of the crime, Raul left the building at 10:18 a.m. wearing a brown hoodie and returned 35 minutes later, at 10:53 a.m., without it. When questioned, Raul explained that he had gone to pick up his friend Luciano, a dishwasher at the restaurant, who lived in the same building as Brianna and her colleagues. Raul claimed the trip took about 20 minutes, but there was a 15-minute gap in his timeline that he refused to explain. Luciano corroborated Raul's story, stating they drove straight to work without stopping. Nevertheless, the detectives remained skeptical about the unaccounted 15 minutes and Raul's suspicious behavior. Raul Ponce Rocha, the manager of El Tequila Salsa, had raised suspicions due to the cuts on his hands, which he claimed were from working with knives. However, there was not enough evidence to detain him at that point. Further investigation revealed that on May 2nd at 1:16 p.m., a single employee had exited the back door of the restaurant, and at the same time, only one person had approached the trash bins. This led to the quick identification of the suspect, who was surprisingly Raul Ponce Rocha, not Sebastian or Hugo Ramirez as initially suspected. A search warrant was obtained for Raul's home, and the search uncovered some peculiar items. Under his mattress, investigators found 4 pairs of women's underwear, several adult videos, a brown hoodie, and a glove similar to the one found in the trash bin. On the same day, Raul's DNA samples were sent for comparison with those found on the plastic bag, and a strand of female hair found on his clothing was also analyzed. All the evidence pointed to Brianna. It was only a matter of time before the test results confirmed the match. Raul was eventually arrested on suspicion of first-degree murder. Sebastian was stunned when he learned that a suspect had been identified in the brutal crime. He had trouble believing that his co-worker, Raul Ponce Rocha, could be capable of such a heinous act. What motivated Raul to commit this crime, especially since he barely knew Brianna? Sebastian's impression of Raul was that he was a friendly and harmless person. The mystery began to unravel in 2011 when Raul stood trial. Despite a lengthy investigation, Raul consistently denied any involvement in the crime and never admitted guilt. However, the prosecution presented strong evidence that contradicted his claims. Raul's DNA was found on several key pieces of evidence, including the iron, knives, a plastic bag, and its contents, as well as under Brianna's fingernails. A shoe print at the crime scene also matched Raul's shoes. The evidence pieced together the events of May 2, 2009. On his way to work that day, Raul passed by Brianna's house, a place that had long fascinated him. Assuming she was out, since her car was not in the driveway, he took advantage of the opportunity to break into her apartment and take what he wanted. Raul had a disturbing habit of collecting women's underwear, with evidence found hidden under his mattress. On the day of the incident, Raul left work, supposedly to pick up his friend Luciano, but instead entered Brianna's apartment without warning. He easily gained entry, suggesting he may have had a key, and went directly to Brianna's room, where he began rummaging through her belongings. When Brianna confronted him, Raul was likely caught off guard and feared being recognized. Panicked, he grabbed the nearest object, an iron, and used it to strike her. He then escalated the violence by slashing her throat with a knife and inflicting multiple other injuries. The investigation found that the killer appeared to take pleasure in the brutal act, as evidenced by the numerous and excessive wounds inflicted on the victim. The attacker also used multiple knives during the assault. After committing the crime, Raul attempted to cover his tracks by washing his hands and removing his jacket, which was likely stained with blood. He then calmly returned to work, pretending nothing had happened, and drove Luciano to the restaurant as planned. Raul took advantage of the lunch break to dispose of the evidence bag in a trash bin, which was captured on the kitchen's video recordings. Before the trial, Raul admitted to meeting with Brianna but claimed he didn't kill her. However, he suspected someone else might have and named a former restaurant employee. Raul stated that he saw this acquaintance, Sergio, at Brianna's house on the day she died. This confirmed that Raul had indeed entered the Ramirez apartment. However, when Raul left, Sergio stayed behind and had an argument with Brianna. Raul's statement raised more questions and led to further investigations. The authorities verified the information and managed to contact Sergio, who was abroad at the time. Sergio appeared at the trial and testified that he was not involved in Brianna's death. He proved that he was not in the country on the day of the crime, as he had left weeks earlier to care for his ill father in Mexico. It became clear that Raul had hoped to falsely accuse Sergio and create doubt among the jurors. However, his plan failed, and Raul's actions showed that he had no qualms about accusing an innocent person of a heinous crime, and he felt no remorse for his actions. The trial of Raul Ponce Rocha drew a large crowd, including Brianna's family members and her friends Sebastian and Hugo. The young men struggled to keep their emotions in check, prompting officers to intervene multiple times to restore calm. In the end, Raul was found guilty of murdering Brianna Schneller and burglary, and was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He is currently serving his sentence at a correctional facility in Wisconsin. After the verdict, Brianna's father expressed his gratitude that justice had been served. He shared that he still keeps a Father's Day card Brianna gave him and cherishes every memory of her.